Good evening, everyone. It's Monday, January 20th. Please rise for the pledge for the special meeting of the Liquor Control Commission. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk Simpson, roll call.
Commissioner Vogel?
Here.
Commissioner Lang?
Here.
Commissioner Papantos?
Present.
Commissioner Rafato?
Here.
Commissioner Vito?
Here.
Commissioner Kruger informed the board she would not be here this evening, and Chairperson Horker.
Here. You have before you the minutes of the special meeting of December 16th, 2019. I need a motion for their approval.
So moved.
Motion, Trustee Papantos. Second. Trustee Rafato. Roll call.
Trustee Vogel?
Yes.
Trustee Lang?
Yes.
Trustee Papantos?
Commissioner, yes.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Rafato?
Yes.
Commissioner Vito?
Yes.
Chairperson Horker?
Yes. Citizens' concerns and comments. Do we have anybody for the
There are
Liquor
none.
Commission?
There are none.
Thank you, Clerk Simpson. New business.
6A, request for a Class J1 liquor license from 312 Nails and Spas Incorporated, DBA 312 Nail Spa, 405 West Dundee Road in the Wheeling Town Center.
Mr. Svandelis.
Thank you. As the title indicates, this is a J1 license request. J1 authorizes the service but not sale of limited quantities of beer and/or wine to customers of the establishment. The Board of Trustees had created the J1 license several months ago, specific for the purpose of nail salons being able to provide up to 2 glasses of wine to their customers free of charge. The businesses are not allowed to sell any liquor. They are limited to the amount that they can serve. And should you consider this license, it would be the first approved J1 license. I'm happy to answer any questions, and the petitioner is here should you have any other questions as well.
Thank you. Commissioner Papantos, you had some questions?
Thank you. Do you do this at any other location, or do you have another location?
Yes, I have 2 other locations, but I never used. I never provide any wine, so I thought there's no location I would add it into the service. But it's all complimentary drink, and people coming in get their service done and get a drink and pamper, you know. But I make sure I have to ask for the ID before I can serve them. Over 21 years old.
And when do you plan to open?
Hopefully, it's been passed all the inspection now, so hopefully by another 3-4 weeks from now, I will have an occupancy with the villas, and we're gonna open.
And you're opening in the new town center, right?
Yes, right at the very city work and theater, and yes.
Thank you.
And if I may ask that any motion to approve is conditioned upon 1, the passage of an ordinance by the Board of Trustees authorizing the creation of a new Class J1 liquor license, 2, submittal of a certificate of insurance indicating appropriate liability insurance coverage for the establishment, 3, payment of all applicable fees, and 4th and last, submittal of Bassett training certificates for all applicable employees.
These are the conditions that are in the code.
Yes.
You're aware of these. Do we have any other questions from the board? If there are no other questions or comments, I need a motion for approval.
So moved.
Motion, Commissioner Rafato, second.
Second.
Commissioner Papantos, roll call, please.
Commissioner Vogel?
Yes.
Commissioner Lang?
Yes.
Commissioner Papantos?
Yes.
Commissioner Rafato?
Yes.
Commissioner Vito?
Yes.
Chairperson Horker?
Yes. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Item B.
6B, consideration of a request for a Class B1 liquor license from One Corporation, DBA Wajo Sushi, the new owner of the existing restaurant at 73 South Milwaukee Avenue.
Hey, hello, sir.
Hello. Questions? Commissioner Papantos?
When did you take over the restaurant?
It's about 2 months ago.
And have you
Actually,
been?
it's like 4 months ago, but like painting and flooring, is all remodeling. So after that, I just opened some months ago.
And have you been serving since then?
No, because, actually first time that I didn't, I don't want the liquor license for my liquor. I don't want to sell the liquor, but thing is, so many customers is already previous, 20 years already old restaurants. As maybe 90% customer asking liquor. So, yeah, so I just trying to, not the hard liquor, beer and wine. That's why I applied for the beer and wine. So maybe I supply for my customer. That's
Thank you.
why I applied.
Thank you. Commissioner Lang?
Thank you. For what it's worth, I've been to this establishment, and I've been to the old one and was recently at the new one, and world of difference. It's a really very nice place. You've really fixed it up nice inside. It's very welcoming now. It's light inside. It's a place that I'd like to go to. So,
Thank you.
yeah, I agree. A liquor license would certainly help this situation.
Please, yeah.
Yes, there are some conditions as well.
Yes, if I may ask that any motion to approve be conditioned upon, first, the passage of an ordinance by the Board of Trustees authorizing the creation of a new Class B1 liquor license. Second, submission of a certificate of insurance indicating liquor liability insurance for the establishment that names the Village of Wheeling as an additional insured party. Third, submittal of Bassett training certificates for all applicable individuals. And fourth, and finally, satisfactory background check results.
Yes.
If there are no other questions or comments, we do need a motion for approval.
So moved.
Motion, Commissioner Papantos.
Second.
Second, Commissioner Lang. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Vogel?
Yes.
Commissioner Lang?
Yes.
Commissioner Papantos?
Yes.
Commissioner Raffato?
Yes.
Commissioner Vito?
Yes.
Chairperson Corker?
Yes. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
That concludes the business of the Liquor Commission for the evening. I need a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Motion, Commissioner Lang, second, Commissioner Raffato. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Liquor Control Commission is adjourned. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Village Board for January 20th, 2020. We need a roll call. Clerk Simpson?
Trustee Vogel?
Yes.
Trustee Lang?
Here.
Trustee Papantos?
Present.
Trustee Raffato?
Here.
Trustee Vito?
Here.
Trustee Kruger informed the board she would not be here this evening, and President Horker.
I'm here. You have before you the minutes of the regular meeting of January 6th, 2020. We need a motion for their approval.
So moved.
Motion, Trustee Papantos, second, Trustee Lang. Roll call.
Trustee Vogel?
Yes.
Trustee Lang?
Yes.
Trustee Papantos?
Yes.
Trustee Raffato?
Yes.
Trustee Vito?
Yes.
President Horker?
Yes. Are there any changes to the agenda?
There are no changes this evening.
Thank you, sir. Clerk Simpson, proclamations.
Does somebody want to do the cancer one first, or?
Whichever you like.
Okay. Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Service, January 20th, 2020. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. devoted his life to advancing equality, social justice, and opportunity for all, and challenged all Americans to participate in the never-ending work of building a more perfect union. Dr. King's teaching can continue to guide and inspire us in addressing challenges in our communities. The King Holiday and Service Act, enacted in 1994, designated the King Holiday as a National Day of Volunteer Service and charged the corporations for national and community services with leading this effort. Since 1994, millions of Americans have been inspired by the life and work of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to serve their neighbors and communities on the King Holiday. Serving on the King Holiday is an appropriate way to honor Dr. King, meet local and national needs, bring our citizens together, and strengthen our communities and nation. The King Day of Service offers an opportunity for Americans to give back to their communities on the holiday and make an ongoing commitment to service throughout the year. King Day of Service projects are organized by a wide range of nonprofit, private businesses, and other organizations across the nation. Citizens of Wheeling have an opportunity to participate in events throughout Northern Illinois on the King Day of Service, as well as to create and implement community service projects where they identify the need. Patrick Horker, President of the Village of Wheeling, proclaims the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday as a day of service in Wheeling and calls upon the people of Wheeling to pay tribute to the life and works of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. through participation in community service projects on Martin Luther King Day and throughout the year.
Thank you, Clerk Simpson. We have nothing,
No, there's no presentation.
the cancer, arresting cancer.
Okay.
Do you
Should have a proclamation for,
No, I don't have anything on the other one. It was a presentation.
well then.
Officer Levert.
I know I'm those.
That microphone on?
Good evening. My name is, we did some fundraising. No,
Officer Levert, Police Department, take it over.
yes. So in October, we held our second annual Arresting Cancer fundraiser at the Dundee Road McDonald's in Wheeling. And with the help of our Citizens Patrol people and the police volunteers that were there, we raised over $1,500 for the fight against cancer. And for those of you that weren't there or don't know what the event was all about, what we do is the police department members that are there, we serve the customers food and we clean the tables. And during that time, whatever money we raise, percentage of it goes to a charity of our choice, which in this case was the American Cancer Society. And we could not have done this, of course, without the support of the police department, the village, but even more importantly, the Mr. David Bear and the Bear Family Restaurants, who were kind enough to let us use their restaurant in order to make this happen. So at this time, I'd like to invite up Mr. Bear and any representatives of the Bear Family Restaurants, along with Tessa Poulsen, who is here from the American Cancer Society, so we can present them with their check. This is a real check. So again, on behalf of the Wheeling Police Department and the Village of Wheeling, we want to present to you this check in the amount of $1,521.81 for the fight against cancer.
My name is David Bear. I'm the owner of the Bear Family Restaurants, and I've got my area supervisor, Griselda Sanchez, and my director of operations, Nicole Buchanan, with me this evening. We just want to say that the volunteerism and the acts of kindness by the community in Wheeling is truly inspiring. We've only been owning and operating the restaurants here in Wheeling for about 3 years. Been in business since 1967, and it's really inspiring to see that the efforts and contributions by this community. Second year, second annual, we're looking forward to doing it again, and we encourage folks who are looking for other opportunities to raise money for their causes to leverage us to do that, because we're a community's responsible and community social engaged organization. So thank you very much and congratulations again. It's two great years.
As mentioned, I'm Tessa Poulsen. I am from the American Cancer Society. I am here on behalf of Marley, who is my colleague, who was here last year, was unable to make it this evening. And just wanted to say we greatly appreciate the annual support from the Wheeling Police as well as the Bear Family Restaurants. It is an amazing opportunity to see the community at work and through the police officers working the drive-through line and taking orders at our local McDonald's to collect donations to support the American Cancer Society. Our mission is to save lives, celebrate lives, and to lead the fight for a world without cancer. We couldn't fulfill our mission without all of your help and great community supporters such as the police and family businesses. So on behalf of the American Cancer Society, thank you to all involved for the 2019 Arrest Cancer event. Thank you.
I would like to just thank the police department for their active role in all that they do above and beyond the roll call and the police calls. We have an amazing police department, and it does get noticed by the residents and by our every time we get evaluated. But you guys are great, so thank you. Put my glasses back on. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Citizen concerns and comments.
Members of the public may address the board with comments regarding issues relevant to village business. No citizen shall speak for more than 5 minutes without consent of the board. Members of the general public who wish to address the board must sign their request to speak form prior to the commencement of the public meeting. Mr. Mark?
Just as a reminder, this is a time for citizens to make their comments and express their concerns and for the board to listen. Neither the board nor the staff will be answering questions. Please.
Good evening. Thank you. I'm Rob Mark. I'm chairman of the Executive Airport Pilots Association Committee to Save Runway 624. I'm a business jet pilot, a flight instructor, former air traffic controller, an industry journalist, and a guy who's been in the industry for 40 years. Tonight, you're going to be asked to vote on the airport's master plan. Understand, we're not here trying to prevent the airport from being reimbursed for their master plan funds. But what we are asking is that you either table the plan's approval or at least strike the portion that calls for closing runway 624. So tonight you're going to hear from pilots who are also engineers, attorneys, journalists, CPAs, just to name a few professions, who also don't want to see the airport close the runway. The airport calls us a, quote, a small but vocal group of non-residents. Most other airports would have probably just called us customers. But, you know, pilots who represent 2/3 of the aircraft based at the airport and contribute 20% of the hangar revenues. So you might remember that classic movie, The Wizard of Oz. Remember the part where Toto runs over and grabs the curtain and yanks it back, and you hear the wizard booming, saying, "Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain." It's because the wizard had something to hide. We kind of find working with the airport is a bit like that. Last month, one of the airport's paid engineers told you here not to worry about all the technical details of the plan, just to focus on the executive summary. I wonder why. But in our own research, we've discovered a number of things at the airport that just don't make sense to us, and I'd like to just mention a couple. By now, you've probably heard more about airport runway safety hotspots than you want to, but of course that hotspot is why the airport's demanding the runway be closed. However, the FAA told us that hotspots normally demand reconfiguring taxiways, not closing runways. So why would the FAA, our industry's regulating body, tell us one thing and tell the airport's paid consultant something else? I don't know. Last month, the airport board chairman publicly declared that runway 624 has been deemed unsafe by the FAA, an organization that's maniacally focused on safety. Interestingly, when we talked to the FAA, they told us they never said any such thing. When I asked the airport board chairman about this conflict last week at a public meeting, he ignored me. Now, the airport says they can't afford to keep runway 624 open. However, we did find a state of Illinois transportation document from a few years ago that showed they approved $4.6 million to cover the reconstruction of that runway. Now, I understand the airport says the FAA's changed the funding mechanism since then, and we've just asked for a few details to verify it, but they've never even responded to us. Southgate Strategies. Might not have heard of it. It's a local PR company that lists the airport's new PR guy, Cody Rogers, who the airport pays $60,000 to each year as a principal. Did you know the airport's board chairman is also a principal at Southgate? So we're also here to speak to the governance of this publicly funded airport, the one that you own. SEPA's tried asking many questions in the past few months when we've discovered some unusual situations, but the board simply dismisses us. They could at least dialogue with us, I would have thought, but maybe that's because little airplanes don't generate as much money as jets do, or maybe they just don't want anybody questioning how they operate. So we're all here tonight to plead with you to understand that allowing the airport to close this runway won't actually fix the safety hotspot, but closing the runway will most definitely create a huge new safety risk for small aircraft. If we all raise some questions tonight for you in your mind, but you still feel you must vote yes, at least strike the portion to close runway 624. There are other available options. It just seems to us, though, the airport board only respects subject matter experts who tell them what they want to hear. And I can tell you, in the aviation business, that's a dangerous attitude. Thank you.
Arthur Gund.
Good evening, trustees. I'm Arthur Gunn, president of SEPA. I've been a FAA safety team rep, and professionally I'm a CPA specializing in audits. I'm also a fraud examiner. I deal in facts, and I've been trained to use heightened professional skepticism while reviewing documents. The entire CAA board, the board, is looking for an accident to happen by removing 624, and have been previously put on notice. Trustee Lang, you were at the meeting that we talked about these issues, and like your CEA board colleagues, you are not a pilot. It is concerning because SEPA, who represents pilots, have not been invited to participate as stakeholders in private focus meetings, as Rob Marks stated. SEPA has been in existence as long as the municipalities have owned the CEA. We've offered and offered, only to be rebuffed on multiple occasions. I request that the Wheeling trustees either scrap the current ALP, modify the ALP to keep 624, or table the discussion and decision until all facts are truthfully and fully known with input from SEPA. I asked the village trustees to have skepticism regarding this plan. There are severe safety concerns we raise. Safety, contrary to comments made by the airport board and staff, is not a convenience to be replaced with extra hangar space. What is the cost benefit of a life? The board omitted facts and presented flawed, inaccurate data about hotspots, wind coverage, and noise mitigation. My colleagues will discuss these in their comments. SEPA wants to prevent accidents, but it appears the Chicago Executive Airport Board is promoting potential future accidents. The CEA board chairman stated safety is literally our #1 core value, and then mentioned something that the runway has been deemed unsafe by the FAA, and referred to the FAA, as Mr. Mark pointed out, an organization that is maniacally focused on safety. He reiterated that in his January 14 letter addressed to President Horker. But the problem is, it's untrue, unsupported. In all of this, there is one major disconnect with the chairman's flawed comments and the facts. Our pilots group submitted a FOIA, as you know, and we got nothing back from the FAA to say that it's unsafe. So no names, no correspondence. All that they gave us was standard literature. So why were these inaccurate assertions made by the CEA board? I have the FOIA request with me tonight if any of you trustees want to hear the oral comments and see the written information. As a forensic auditor, I wonder what else might not be fully disclosed to the trustees and the public. It frightens me. It's either intentional or otherwise. I'd like to also emphasize an email that was sent to all of you by Jim Krieger. He is a retired O'Hare Tower chief. He states, in relevant part, for 33 years, I was employed by the FAA as an air traffic controller at O'Hare, and a whole bunch of other things that are listed, Deputy Air Traffic Manager of TRACON, but most importantly, U.S. Runway Safety Group Manager. I am disheartened to learn that the airport is pursuing efforts to decommission 624. This runway is often the best runway available for smaller aircraft during certain wind conditions. Closing the runway eliminates the safer alternatives. I respectfully ask that you reconsider the decision to close 624. Those were the comments of an experienced FAA retiree, who I'm sure the chairman will deem a subject matter expert. As an expert, he is telling you trustees not to decommission 624. If it becomes known that safety was put aside for hangar space and an accident occurs, I question, might the village as an owner be subject to litigation? I don't know. I'm not an attorney. Safety is not a convenience. It affects pilots, passengers, community residents, their families, and friends. Safety should be the #1 priority, not additional hangar space. Here's another thing. A lot of pilots across the nation are contacting me and asking me, what's up with executive again? They're not coming to executive. They're not coming to spend money in Wheeling. This affects Wheeling businesses. The problem is that the airport board doesn't care about small pilots and whatnot. Big jets come in, they go downtown. Smaller pilots come in, they want to have a hotspot. They want to, hotspot's a bad word, but they want to go to some of the restaurants on Milwaukee Avenue. If safety was truly the #1 priority, CA board would keep 624 rather than decommissioning it to make room for hangars. That is the major disconnect to me between the talking points by the board and the staff and the factual truth. Thank you for your time.
Rogers Faden.
Good evening, President Horker and trustees. I'm Rogers Faden. I'm also with SEPA, and I'd like to discuss a request by the Chicago Executive Airport Board to approve their proposed airport layout plan. We feel that a feature it contains, the removal of runway 624, is a very bad idea. It reduces the safety of the airport, particularly for later general aviation aircraft, which, by the way, comprised 2/3 of the aircraft at the based at the airport. The FAA sets standards for winds to determine how much time a particular runway configuration has acceptable crosswinds. We analyzed the wind data using FAA recommended data source, process, and their analysis program. And we found that by removing runway 624, the airport falls well below the FAA's recommended 95% coverage. Why are we speaking to you about this? The closure of runway 624 was never in the master plan presented to the public. Its first publication was in the airport layout plan that you and Prospect Heights Board received in November. There was never an opportunity for public comments regarding this closure. We've tried to discuss what we found with the Executive Airport Board on numerous occasions regarding the wind analysis, and we've been ignored. When someone comes to this board to develop or wants to develop real estate, they come up with an idea, they find a location, they hire an architect, they work with that architect to design what they want and work around any obstacles. They present the proposal to your planning commission, they present it to you, and you, the trustees, review this proposal, ask questions, your experience in these matters, and your representation of your constituents and the village's interests guide your evaluation. If you don't feel that a project meets your requirements or standards, you'll suggest changes and send the developer back to update the project. Today, you have presented to you another developer's project. That developer is the Executive Airport Board. They came up with some ideas. They hired an engineering firm, CMT, to formalize those ideas, work around any problems, and produce a plan. CMT, like the developer's architect, works at the direction of the airport board to find a way to sell their ideas. While they're experienced, they represent a biased point of view. They're now asking you to approve the development plan. As a pilot and a member of SEPA, I suggest that this proposal, by eliminating runway 624, reduces the safety of the airport below FAA recommendations. As trustees evaluating a development proposal.
That's time, sir.
No.
Can you?
No, this is fine.
Oh.
Please consider some other features of the plan. It removes $10 million of assessed value from the tax rolls. $7 million of that is in Wheeling. It displaces from those businesses that are going to get replaced hundreds of jobs that probably will not get replaced locally. It removes and converts all the commercial property on your Milwaukee Avenue development corridor into a dry bottom detention. That's where stormwater gets accumulated. It proposes hangar expansion that's more than double the master plan projected requirements, all the way out to 2036. It removes all the open areas that are used to support community activities, such as parking for Run the Runway, 4th of July festivities. It removes the office building at 1098 Milwaukee that houses several of the flight schools at the airport. This will greatly hamper their operations as they will no longer be in proximity to their airplanes. The aircraft parking will also be moved to an area that doesn't have any office buildings close by. I'm sure that's going to make them feel welcome. Finally, the projection for growth in operations is modest, around 10%, but this equates to 10% more operations over the noise areas. I implore you to do as you would with any other development proposal that did not meet your objectives. Send it back for revision. Tell the Executive Airport Board to come back with a new plan that, for safety reasons, leaves runway 624 open, preserves your Milwaukee Avenue corridor businesses, jobs, and development, and doesn't discourage the precious few non-FBO businesses that are at the airport. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lou Otnick? Okay, sorry.
I guess I'm going to be a whistleblower. I'm one of the pilots that lives in Wheeling. So I'm here to say a little bit about 624 as well. This is my 63rd year of flying at Chicago Executive Airport. I know I might not look that old, but I am. I started flying in 1957 at Sally's Flying School. During the course of my flying career, I became the in 1996, the U.S. flight instructor of the United States. In 2016, I was inducted into the Illinois Aviation Hall of Fame. I have 16,000 plus hours in small planes, mostly at Milwaukee, or Chicago Executive, excuse me. My students and I have used runway 624 hundreds of times during the prevailing southwest winds. It has been well known that the Airport Commission over the past years is mostly interested in high executive type aircrafts, mostly jets, and not in our little general aviation type of aircraft. However, through the various community relations and flight schools, the Civil Air Patrol, the Air Scouts, the Young Eagle flights, etc., brings the surrounding population that shows what a valuable asset we are to the community. By closing runway 624, it only hampers the hazards due to the crossing runways and maintenance costs. But it seems to me they have been more problems with corporate jet traffic running off of runways and going into the EMAS at the end of one of the runways, which is very costly. Little airplanes don't do that type of thing. Due to the amount of corporate traffic at Chicago Executive, I generally fly to other airports with students so that they can have more time during takeoff and landings without many ground delays. However, when the weather is marginal and people are afraid to leave the airport boundary areas because of the weather hazards may close down and close them in, they prefer to stay at the airport and do their takeoff and landings, and when the winds are from the southwest, they can only use runway 624. So by closing that runway, you're going to be hurting a lot of the flight schools and students from the surrounding area, and I hope you reconsider. I have copies if anybody would like to have this report.
Jim Lorenzo?
Good evening. My name is Jim Lorzell. I'm a resident of Prospect Heights. I'm a pilot of 27 years, a commercial pilot for 25 years, and I'm a tenant on your airport. I'd like to point out some inconsistencies with the chairman and executive director's statements that were included in your packet of information for the airport layout plan. But first, I'd like to ask you to remember and keep in mind three words: misinformation, falsehood, and verify. Remember them, please. Misinformation, falsehood, and verify. In the letters, they stated that we were a small vocal group of non-residents. I'm a resident. The Pilot Association represents over 120 pilots, some of whom are residents of the municipalities who use and base aircraft at the airport. from student pilots to airline transport pilots and designated pilot examiners, from light sport aircraft to helicopters to jets. The chairman stated the FAA said runway 624 is unsafe. I filed a FOIA request with the airport asking who said that and received a brochure about hotspots. No name of the FAA person who said it was unsafe. We've not been able to find anyone at the FAA or IDOT that said that runway is unsafe. The chairman stated that runway 624 is the major contributing cause to a ground safety issue, a hotspot. According to the FAA facilities director, the cause of the hotspot is not the runway, but the complex intersection of 3 taxiways in close proximity of runways. Removing the runway does not clear the hotspot. In fact, removing all 3 runways will not clear that hotspot. In 2007, the FAA said that a school and parking lot were in the clear zones of 24. The school was not in the clear zone and parking isn't allowed use in that space. This cost the village of Wheeling thousands and thousands of dollars in legal fees and settlements. This could have been completely avoided if the airport management had acted honorably and notified the FAA of their error. But they refused, forcing us, the users, to rectify that error. The executive director stated Wheeling has never voted to prevent the closure of runway 624. The issue was tabled and no vote was taken. Evidently, the executive director had not read the minutes of their joint meeting dated March 31st of 2007. The motions to close the runway were removed from the table, discussed, and voted on. Wheeling voted 6-0. Prospect Heights voted 4-1 not to close the runway. They have said that no FAA funding is available for a third runway. I do not believe that that is entirely true. No one that we have talked to at IDOT, who manages your TIPS program, has said money is not available. It might be a low priority, but it's still available. Perhaps, as the airport layout plan handbook states, designating 624 as a crosswind runway, which it is, funding would be available. The chairman stated that 624 maintenance diverts resources that could be used for other projects like the residential sound insulation system. This sounds like it could be interpreted as an either-or, either the runway or the sound insulation. Really? When the airport board seems to have found $3 million for a new customs building, which has nothing to do with safety or noise, and is used on average barely once a day. This is a safety issue for nearly 2/3 of the based aircraft on the field. Yes, the average use may only be 5 to 7 times per day, and there are reasons for that. But runway 1230 is also only used 5 to 7 times a day. But they haven't mentioned that. The airport's mission statement states that they are to provide a safe, modern aviation facility to serve the business and residential needs of our residents, neighbors, and the users. Safety is first, yet this appears to be more about money for development and not about safety. When the winds are from the southwest, 624 is the only runway to safely land or take off for smaller aircraft. They are ignoring their own mission statement. 12.5 years ago, I stood before this board and presented information that proved to the board it was not safe to close the runway 624 then, and it is not safe now. Remember those 3 words, misinformation, falsehoods, and verify? Please look closely at all of the information that you receive. I would ask that you not approve the airport layout plan and master plan that includes the removal of runway 624 and not have it ignored for another 12.5 years. Thank you.
Andrew Warrington.
Good evening. My name is Andrew Warrington. I regularly fly my Cirrus aircraft from Chicago Executive, where it's based at Signature. Like the others that have spoken to you today, I pay hangar fees, maintenance costs, and fuel flowage fees, as well as federal taxes for runway upgrades. I'm an instrument-rated private pilot and rely on the ability to get into and out of the airport, where I fly my plane for business and pleasure. I'm also a practicing professional mechanical engineer and hold a PhD degree in mechanical engineering. As you've heard, runway 246 is key to safety for Chicago Executive. I respectfully request that you do not allow the airport board to proceed with their plan to close this valuable runway, which is a vital safety asset for PWK.
I further suggest that you ask the board to take advantage of the potentially available funds to bring 246 back up to standard and improve the runway and its markings. Also, please ask them to negotiate with the Forest Preserve to top the trees on the approach end of runway 24. These steps, which have been neglected for some time, will make 246 an even better and more widely used safety advantage to GA aircraft and pilots. I'd like to ask your indulgence while I make 3 points, which in addition to what you've already heard from others, will, I believe, help you to support the pilot's position. Firstly, as with most GA aircraft, unlike noisy jets and heavier aircraft, are rather lighter but nevertheless quieter aircraft have a more constrained runway crosswind capability. Our choices are therefore also more constrained. Also, though we all regularly practice crosswind landings for proficiency, we're not professional pilots, and inevitably, for many of us, the most prudent and safe choice is to use our good judgment and select the most preferred runway for landing, particularly in brisk wind conditions. Therefore, for many GA aircraft and pilots, the safe option is to use runway 6 and especially 24 for landing given the prevailing winds. Secondly, as an illustration of this point, I'll draw your attention to the wind roses that are published by the Iowa State University's Environmental Mesonet. These are what the airport's consultants have used for their analysis, I understand. This is, though, a very valuable resource for airport planning. By reference to the data for Chicago executive average from 1995 to the end of 2019, it's possible to determine the most preferred runways given the distribution of wind speed and direction. For example, in cases where the wind speed is over 10 knots, runway 24 is the preferred runway in over 7% of the time. Runway 6 is preferred 5% of the time. Without this choice, GA pilots would, for roughly 12% of the time, equivalent to 3.6 days every month and more during the winter, be forced to compromise safety by selecting a less preferred runway for landing in stronger winds. The fact that the statistics show that 246 is used in only 2% of the landings is illustrative of the point that investment should be made in the infrastructure of this important runway. Alternatively, and I'm sure none of us would like to see this, we could, as the airport board has suggested, divert to other airports who have retained their crosswind runways, such as DuPage and Waukegan. I know that they'd love us to move there permanently as well. Lastly, I looked into the claim that has been made by the airport board that runway 246 is detrimental to safety. I researched the available government resources. The NTSB publishes all accident reports. Thankfully, only 2 are in the database for PWK and neither are related to 246. However, as you may be aware, NASA administers the Aviation Safety Reporting System, which is like a voluntary system used by pilots and air traffic controllers to report near misses and incidents that could have resulted in serious accidents. PWK features in 183 reports from 2002 to 2019. I analyzed the 28 or 15% that simply mention runway 246. Only 1 is a hotspot issue, which seems to contradict the airport board's chairman's comment about this being a problem, drawing the attention of the FAA, a claim that apparently they also deny. There are also 4 reports requesting tree topping on runway 24. A further 4 reports talk about student pilots and their instructors, and 1 is a gear-up landing. 1, interesting, relates to a pilot who landed on runway 24 after being vectored by the tower for runway 16 in winds gusting to 40 knots. So I respectfully request your assistance in keeping 246 open. We all believe this is a significant safety option for the many GA pilots that use Chicago Executive. Thank you for your time.
Bill Hellier.
Trustees, thank you for appointing me to the commission, to the directorship over at Chicago Executive Airport. I'm just one of the regular guys. I'm just a resident of Wheeling, a citizen of Wheeling, so I appreciate the opportunity to serve. And I thank all of the people from SEPA for providing the input that you have regarding your concerns. I appreciate your passion. I'm very passionate about my profession as well. So that's much appreciated. It's especially appreciated as a new member of the board. As a person who is just a citizen of Wheeling, like most of the people, I feel like that's my value to represent on the board. I certainly don't feel like I'm in a position to directly address the concerns from the pilots that have been here today and on other days. But I can say that in the 3 months that I've been on the board, I have been very impressed with how concerned the leadership is about safety. And I am very impressed with the measured responses that they have had in all decisions that they have made. So since I am not very knowledgeable about pilots issues, admittedly, I'm going to read a statement from one of my recent predecessors, Vince Donahue, who was on the board prior to me and is a pilot. So he says, good evening, President Horker and the Board of Trustees. I write to you as a career aviator and former member of the Chicago Executive Airport Board of Directors. Serving on the airport board was one of the great honors of my professional life. I have flown all types of aircraft in the Navy, as a corporate pilot, and now commercially for many years. This includes years of flying in and out of CEA, meaning I have seen all sides of this great airport in a way that very few have, as both a pilot and a board director. That's why, after careful consideration, I approve of the airport layout plan that will be presented to you tonight. You have heard from critics of the ALP, specifically the proposal to eventually decommission runway 624, but they are obscuring the real issue, which is the issue of what we call the pilot in command. The pilot in command is the person solely in charge of the safety of the flight. Simply put, no one can force a pilot to fly. In fact, the most important decision a pilot makes is not what runway to use, it's whether to go flying in the first place. Runway 624 is the shortest and skinniest runway of CEA and can only be used by small airplanes. The only reason for any plane to ever use it is when you can't use the primary and secondary runways. And in that rare hypothetical scenario when winds are too strong for a small plane to use the other two runways, I will argue that the proper decision for the pilot in command is to simply not fly that day. Fortunately, CEA's primary and secondary runways already serve 98% of flights for all aircraft. So in the hypothetical scenario the ALP critics propose, we are talking about a handful of days a year at most that small planes cannot fly. That is hardly a reason to continue pouring millions of dollars into a runway that most planes at CEA cannot use in the first place. The pilot in command must make smart, safe flight decisions and not expect the airport to maintain a runway that exists just for you to use a few days a year. That's no way to manage an airport. Reallocating the money spent on 624 could mean increased safety measures for the other 98% of flights, or more funds made available for the residential sound installation program, which I was proud to vote for as a board director. The ALP that Jamie is presenting tonight is a smart and safe plan that sets the airport up for success for the next 30 years. I say that as an experienced pilot and a former board member who studied the ALP in great depth. Thank you very much for your time this evening. Vince Donahue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Warren Brule.
Thank you, Board, for hearing what I have to say tonight. I'm Dr. Warren Brule, and I want to bring a different side to this discussion. I spoke to this board 2 weeks ago. I'm a commercial pilot, and I'm working towards becoming an airline transport pilot. I'm a tenant of Hangar 5 at Chicago Executive through Signature Flight Support. I fly approximately 400 to 500 hours per year. This is not only a recreational GA pilot discussion. This is a discussion that really hinges on the concern that I have. And I want to acknowledge part of that concern. We gave money tonight to the American Cancer Society. I do volunteer flight missions for an organization called Lifeline Pilots. And frequently, I'm called upon to meet another pilot to take a patient to Mayo Clinic or to a medical center somewhere in the country. Some of those flights originate here. Some of them, I need to leave here to go to another location or I need to come back. My concern is that if we take out 624, we're really not affecting the ability of myself or other pilots that are indeed not just flying missions for recreational purposes, to go have a $100 hamburger, a $200 breakfast. This is more about what is right for people that need it. And we raise money, and we're telling patients that we're willing to raise money by doing these volunteer services with our police force. But what are we saying about the fact that this airport is used for things other than simply just recreational things for GA pilots? So I would encourage this board to look at that safety is not a convenience. It's something that is a life-saving thing. And I'm asking this board to consider not only keeping 624, but encouraging them to improve it, as Mr. Warrington said, so that it will be used more often and in the proper way. So thank you.
Michael Latash.
Good evening, trustees. My name is Mike Latash. I'm a private pilot with an instrument rating, and I learned to fly at Chicago Executive Airport. I probably have a fraction of the experience that probably even one of the people that spoke to you earlier. But I feel that and that only having flown for about 10, 12 years of my life so far, I more acutely remember what it's like to be a student and what it means to have runways laid out in a way that supports one of the major missions of the airport, which I feel is aviation education. So many people learn to fly here in Chicago Executive Airport. I'm not a resident of Wheeling. I live in Northbrook, but many surrounding communities use the flight schools here at Chicago Executive. And when you're learning to fly, and when you're learning how to land an aircraft, a lot of times crosswind landings are something that comes maybe a little bit later, maybe closer to your actual certification time. And at those times, runways like 624 are crucial. I've heard something that really worried me, and read it as well, that only 2% or something like this of the landings in the airport are on runway 624, which may be true, but it's a specious argument. It's also the wrong question to ask. What proportion of your time, there was a great conversation I just had today, what proportion of your time over your life do you spend on an operating table? Probably a pretty small proportion, but boy is that proportion important. And it's the same exact issue with runway 624. When you're dealing with people who are learning to fly aircraft, and they're light aircraft, and the winds are at from a certain direction, and they're with a certain strength, runway 624 is the most safe and best option. And I think that in general, closing it is kind of a short-sighted thing. You're kind of maybe saving a little bit of money, you're maybe redirecting that money for other development, but it's sort of forgetting one of the main reasons of the airport, which is not just to make money, not just to serve corporate clients, but also to be kind of a pillar of the community and to support aviation education. I think I won't take up more of your time, but I felt like this is something that's very important for you to hear from someone who's maybe not a career pilot, but someone who's maybe a little closer to remembering what it's like to be a student. Thank you.
Ruth Dennerlein.
No, it's not checked. Thank you. I've spoken before. I don't know if you recall my credentials. I don't like talking about myself that way, but I think it's important here. I'm a commercial pilot, aeronautical engineer, also an attorney. I'm an aircraft commander for the U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary, and I fly patrols out of Chicago Executive Airport on a regular basis. I've been flying for 34 years, 32 years out of Milwaukee, Chicago Executive, sorry. And as I've said before, it's an unsafe decision to close runway 624. And I heard the comments from the gentleman who was not here that were read on the record, and I disagree. A pilot in command, yes, that's the expression that you use when an aircraft, when a person's flying, a pilot's flying the airplane. You're in command of the aircraft. But I'll tell you what, it's not a choice whether you can not fly that day when you're already out flying and you're in the air and you want to land, and you want to land safely. And this happened to me at the airport. I was coming back, and the wind forecast had changed, and instead of gusting to 30 knots, which was fairly manageable, it was gusting to 42 knots, and it was coming directly out of the southwest. And runway 24 was the only place, the only runway I could use to land safely. And I'll tell you what, I've been flying for 30 plus years, not as long as Lou here, of course, but it's scary when you're in that cockpit. It's kind of like the movies. Your yoke is going like this. You're literally holding on with two hands. And the one thing you're thinking about is getting back on the ground safely. And coming back to this airport and realizing you don't have the option to land safely is scary to me. And I've been flying for 34 years. So it's not a small issue. It's not a matter of choice. And I want to get to a point of common sense. Here's a depiction of the airport runway. This is the main runway, 34. 624 is the only perpendicular runway.
Excuse me.
Sorry.
We're going to pause the time. There's a microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
It'll work better. Well, it's okay.
My point was that I want to appeal to your common sense first. I know you all aren't pilots, but just looking at this other secondary runway, 1230, is practically parallel to a pilot to the other main runway. 624 is in fact a crosswind runway. That's why it was put there. That's why it was installed that way. Now, the airport board speaks as though 624 is some abandoned railway track almost, like it's never used. They talk about this number of 2%. It's actually 2.9% from the master plan report. This runway is used 2,500 times a year, 6 to 7 times a day on a historical average for 2011 to 2015. It's used. And imagine if you used your back seat belts in the back of your car 2,500 times a year. I don't know, maybe you do if you got a big family, but if you're, think about that. Would you take your seat belts out of your back of your car just because you don't use them a lot? No, you wouldn't. Doesn't make sense. Now, this other issue that's come up is about the hotspots. And I know this term was a foreign term to you before you heard about, well, I need to go back to this, before you heard about this whole issue about runway 24. But it struck me at the December meeting when CMT, the engineers...
Can you hold up the microphone, please?
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
When the engineers, thank you. When the engineers were talking about these hotspots, they didn't show you a diagram of the airport. Well, the hotspot is this oval right here. It does not include the runway. It includes this 5-way intersection of taxiways. The hotspot is not an intersection of runways. In fact, if you look at other diagrams, there are 2 other airports in Illinois. One example is Moline. It actually has a hotspot that includes a triple intersection of runways. This is not like that. In fact, the FAA has a priority list for hotspots. And I looked up that database, is current as of September 2019. Our airport is not on that priority list. It is not on the priority list for mitigation, and it certainly is not something that can't be dealt with because pilots deal with these things all the time. It's not like
a hot spot is some wound that you have to immediately cover up and deal with. It's a matter of addressing it. It's like going up to...
Can you give me one sentence and wrap it up?
I'll wrap it up by this. Use your common sense. Look at this as what it is. It's a draft plan. If you look at every page of this layout plan, it says draft. Do what you would do with any other normal development. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Sherwood Begman.
I understand that I won't get an answer, but I'm going to ask a question, and that is, how's business? Starting on Milwaukee Avenue and working west, 4 restaurants have closed last year, and 2 businesses have closed. On Dundee, the Whitley has gone belly up, and the new operators have no residents. And that brings me to the Wheeling Town Center. Anytime I've driven around in the evening, 6, 7, 8 o'clock, I have never seen more than 16 lighted apartments out of 150 or so. The stores are mostly empty, and there's a burger joint there who's offering $15 burgers, and they're proud because they have 80 beers. That doesn't sound like Wheeling to me. And in addition to that, Uptown 500 is going to open across the way. And just as an aside, I haven't seen more than 2 cars in Uptown 500 for about 2 weeks now. I don't even know if they're still building. But that means another 300 or so empty apartments. And as a consequence, I've come to a conclusion on my own that things aren't that great in Wheeling, especially when it comes to rental and retail. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Stephen Whitney.
Good evening. I'm not going to take very long. I don't have a presentation all written out, and I don't have a lot of good statistics for you, but I thought that I would just give you a little bit of my personal background. I've been flying for 45 years. I own 1 aircraft, and I'm partners in another, both based here at Chicago Executive. And I can relay to you a personal experience within the last few months of why 246 is important. On October 12th, I went to another airport to fly Young Eagles. I don't know if you guys know about the Young Eagles program. It's volunteer pilots introducing kids with their first flight. I've flown more than 500 kids myself. I've done it quite a bit. On this particular day, I took off. I went to the other airport. I headed back, and while I was on my way back, the wind picked up to, I believe it was 28 knots, straight down runway 24. If I didn't know this until I was getting close and could listen to it listen to the radio report. I would not have been able to land. My aircraft's based there. I would not have been able to land safely if 24 had not been there at that time. There was a couple statements that it's only used 6 or 7 times a day. I don't think that's accurate. I think what really happens is it's not hardly used at all until we really need it. And on those days, it gets used a lot. And so I just want you guys to think really hard about this. The idea that it's a crosswind runway is important. The idea, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with why crosswinds can be dangerous, particularly strong crosswinds. Airplanes basically fly because of wind, right? They create their own wind. They're flying into the wind that they're creating all the time. The problem is when that wind isn't aligned up with the ground that they're coming down to. And so when you have a crosswind, you wind up having to correct for that, and it winds up trying to push you off the runway, which isn't a big deal unless it's strong, and particularly if it's strong and gusty. And when that happens, all of a sudden you're doing those gyrations that the other guy was talking about, and that's where it gets very dicey, particularly if you're an inexperienced pilot, particularly if you have an airplane that flies very slowly, and that's why we need this here at the airport. That's all I have to say.
Phil Mader.
Hello, I'm Phil Mader. I live basically at the end of 1631, a couple miles back, and 1624 is an important runway in that I've tried with the previous PR person that worked at the airport to try to get this runway utilized more frequently. I had an opportunity to take a tour of the tower. I spoke with the tower manager. Basically, he indicated that they don't tell the pilots to use this runway, that the pilots pick and choose which runways they'd like to use. More often than not, when they do instruct the pilot to take off, they tell them to take off on 1631. That goes directly over my house. By closing this runway, we're just going to increase the amount of traffic that's going to go over my house as well as several other thousands of people's houses. It's not going to make it any better. I was told by one of the board members from the Prospect Heights side, Mr. Kearns, that we're noise people. We're one of the noise people, and that by getting on board with this, we're ultimately trying to hurt the airport. We're not trying to hurt the airport. We're not trying to cause a problem for the airport, but what we're trying to do is live a decent life in our community without noise. We've worked very hard to try to eliminate noise in our community. The airport has come up with a window program. Now, I was told before this meeting when Rob Mark approached me and was explaining that it wasn't the FAA that was requiring this runway to be closed. It was actually Chicago Executive Board that was wanting this runway closed. And in that process of telling me that, Court Harris managed to go through 3 rows of chairs, come and put his hand on my shoulder, and tell me that if I listen to these guys and get involved, that ultimately what's going to happen is that there's going to be less money for the window program. Now, if so be it. I don't need veiled threats. I don't care for them. And maybe he was just trying to inform me of the situation. But the reality of it is, we've figured out mathematically, based on the amount of money that this airport is putting towards us, and their grand plans with their PR about how great the window program is, ultimately are going to take somewhere between 60 and 65 years to actually complete all the residents. So, if I have to wait longer, so be it. But I want to be able to sit in my backyard without a constant stream of traffic. Now, I got to tell you, these GA guys, they're beautiful people as far as pilots go. Because when they come over our house, when they do come over, they throttle back, it's very quiet, and it's not so bad. But I don't want to have constant streams of planes going over my house because we're closing a runway. And they're experiencing, it's very encouraging to see somebody else experience the punishment that we had to go through to try to stop the runway expansion. So I see the same thing happening to them. It's interesting to watch. It's unfortunate. The candor of that executive board has changed drastically, and it's an us against them, and it doesn't have to be. And I've gotten up several times in front of them and asked them to work with the public. We're not bad people. We just want to have some peace. We want to enjoy our lives in Wheeling, and we do enjoy our life in Wheeling. So I would just ask maybe, Pat, maybe you and Helmer could get together and maybe have a talk with the chairman and maybe the board and see if they can't conduct themselves to the public in a little bit better manner. And they claim they do, but the reality is they're not. I have a lot of experience with, as well as Steve and some of the other members that are involved with us. And their PR guy, for the record, has not once contacted us to talk to us and to see what our opinions are. Thank you very much.
Richard Epres?
It's Richard Spies for the record.
Oh, I'm sorry. I couldn't read your handwriting. I'm sorry.
You're not the only one.
Okay.
I don't have anything written or prepared, so I'll just wing it. I'm a private pilot. I'm a business owner. I've been a tenant at the airport for over 7 years. You have a very robust asset in the airport. I fully believe that eliminating 624 would subtract from that asset. I've used that runway on many occasions when the winds have dictated that's the preferred runway. It is the smallest runway there, and it is basically tailored towards the GA fleet, which is 2/3 their airplanes at the airport. So I would think definitely don't subtract from your asset. I would increase the maintenance of that runway and make your asset more robust. Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you. Thank you all for your comments and for being so patient. Okay. In the evening, in the interest of brevity, we're going to move staff reports to the end, or just moving this along? Yeah. If no one has any objections. We're going to jump right into the meat of the meeting. Clerk Simpson, consent agenda.
11, a consent agenda. All items listed on the consent agenda are considered to be routine by the village board and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a board member or citizen so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the general order of business and considered after all other agenda items. 11A, ordinance amending Chapter 4.32 of the Village of Wheeling Municipal Code, alcoholic liquor dealers, specifically Section 4.32.085, to increase the authorized number of Class B1 and J1 liquor licenses and decrease the authorized number of Class B liquor licenses. 11B, a resolution approving an engineering service proposal from Hager Engineering LLC for the 2021 water main replacement and roadway resurfacing project in an amount not to exceed $89,500. 11C, resolution authorizing change order number 1 and final to increase the contract with Trine Construction Corporation for the industrial lane improvement program by the amount of $33,163.53. 11D, ordinance amending Title 8, Chapter 8.54, cannabis and other intoxicating compounds of the Wheeling Village Code regarding the use and possession of cannabis, cannabis paraphernalia, and drug paraphernalia in the village. 11E, ordinance amending the Wheeling Municipal Code Title 2, Officers, Administration, and Personnel, Chapter 2.21, Village Manager, Section 2.21.060, Powers and Duties.
Thank you, Clerk Simpson. Any questions or comments on consent agenda? If there are not, I need a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion, Trustee Lang, second, Trustee Vogel. Roll call, please.
Trustee Vogel?
Yes.
Trustee Lang?
Yes.
Trustee Papantos? Yes. Trustee Rafato?
Yes.
Trustee Vito?
Yes.
President Horker?
Yes. 13.
A?
A and, yes, A and B. Want to read them together?
Yes, please.
Please read A and B together.
Read them together?
Yes, please.
13A, ordinance granting a special use to permit a day spa with submersion pools at 350 East Dundee Road, Spa Forest, docket number 2019-25. 13B, ordinance granting major site plan and appearance approval for a building addition and related site improvements at 350 East Dundee Road, Spa Forest, docket number PC 19-22.
Thank you, Clerk Simpson. Mr. D'Onofrio. This is a very cool project.
For purposes of brevity, I'll discuss both these at the same time. They're two separate ordinances and action that the board is to take action on, but I'll go ahead, it's one project. So the request is for a proposed day spa with the submersion pools. This business is known as Spa Forest and is proposed to be located at 350 East Dundee Road. The property is located in the B3 Commercial Zoning District, and that district use regulations allows day spas, but only as a special use. So this evening, you're being asked to comment and take action on the request for a special use. The applicant is C. Castle Group, in its application to open a spa at this location. It would be open 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. With respect to amenities, it would include saunas, spa services, indoor and outdoor swimming pools, as well as some food service for its customers. I will defer to the applicant to kind of fill in the blanks and provide you more detail since they're here this evening. Also in your agenda materials, there's quite a bit of detail that was provided. With respect to item 13A, which is the ordinance granting the special use, at the January 8th Plan Commission meeting, it voted 6 in favor, none against, with 1 absent, to recommend approval of the special use. The details of the Plan Commission's deliberations and recognition are found in the findings of fact and recommendations, which were also in your packets. Although the Plan Commission recommended approval, staff asked that one condition be placed on it. Pursuant to Section 1910-30K of the Village Code, it requires that a special use not in operation within 1 year of approval shall expire. Given the complexity and amount of improvements to be made to this, staff is recommending that 1 year be extended to 2 years. However, that's up to the board whether or not, but in our estimation, it'd be difficult for this project to begin operation within 12 months if it's approved. Along with the special use, there's a companion ordinance. This is item 13B, which grants major site plan and appearance approval for a building addition and site improvement to the property. So the special use deals with the use. The second ordinance deals with the improvements to both the site and the building. As the board might recall, back in September, it conducted a concept review of the project and received a favorable review at that time. The applicant then proceeded with their formal applications. The building addition is one of the first things, and that would be located on the east side of the building. This addition would serve as a new main entrance into the facility and be about 6,900 square feet of additional floor space. There would be also a second floor, which would be an outdoor pool. That would add about an additional, it's a little larger than the surface below. That would add about another 200 square feet over that 6,844. Other improvements would include site improvements that includes parking lot resurfacing, restriping, drainage and grading improvements, ADA compliance, and elimination of one curb cut along Dundee Road. There'd also be new exterior lighting both in the parking lot and on the building itself. And in that they're changing an existing office building to a spa, you can imagine there are a number of internal alterations that need to be made to the building itself. So there will be major changes to the floor plans from the interior perspective, not the exterior. And finally, there will be landscaping upgrades and a new trash enclosure. Plan Commission also considered this request at its meeting and also voted 6-0 in favor of granting this, but they did make recommendations for 5 conditions be placed on the approval, and I'll briefly describe those. One, that the parking lot be milled, overlaid, and restriped. Second, signage for the project is not included in this approval. The applicant will have to submit a separate permit and plans for a signage program. Third, the proposed trash enclosure shall be modified to include caps on top of the enclosure. For the CMU on the front face of the trash enclosure shall be covered with limestone. And fifth, the trees along the north property line must be pruned prior to occupancy. Be happy to answer any questions you might have. Otherwise, the applicant, I believe, wants to make a presentation.
Thank you. Trustee Lang, you had some questions, followed by Trustee Bapantos.
Thank you. Mike, my question is for the special use and a little clarification on that. Is that extension to 2 years the actual occupancy of the project or the start of the project?
It is the actual occupancy.
Okay. Great. Because all too often, well, I shouldn't say all too often, there are occasions where we've done special uses like this and the developer is trying to get financing, trying to get things rolling, and they really do wait that full year and then some to get
Correct.
Started on this.
Right.
So the petitioner would probably know better, but if you know, when will this project actually start once?
I would defer to the petitioner on that.
Okay.
Could we have someone from the project? Thank you, sir. Please identify yourself.
Good evening. My name is Jared Plassick, and I'm with Manhard Consulting, the civil engineer, and I am representing Seacastle Development. In regards to your question, the intent from our team would be to, as soon as, assuming tonight goes well and we receive a approval as it relates to the development from the village, our goal would then be to pursue the building permit and the site permit process through the MWRD and all the respective jurisdictions such as the village, et cetera, in order to continue to move the construction process forward as quickly as possible.
And you think within the 2 years you'll certainly have occupancy?
That would certainly be the goal, and should that, should we encounter any kind of an issue in meeting that construction timeline, we would be sure to come forth before the board again to discuss why that may not have been realized and explain any reasoning as to why that process might not have been realized. We understand that the permitting process from a site perspective is going to take some time. Going through the MWRD is never exactly a quick process, and we think and it also for reconstruction of this magnitude for an interior build-out takes a little bit of time from an architectural standpoint to develop construction drawings, et cetera, and to bring everything in consideration as it relates to the building itself. So there is a bit of time that's going to be required on our end to develop the documents and develop all of the construction drawings, et cetera, that would be necessary. So I would still anticipate, from our side that might take some time, 6 months, 8 months, 9 months for this year. But then the goal would be to start construction as soon as we can work our way through that permitting and approval process through all the various municipalities.
Right. And one final question, was there any need determined, hopefully, for that abandoned house that's to the east of the property?
While we appreciate the board's consideration, and we also would like to take advantage of such an asset, unfortunately, just due to its nature being almost entirely within the floodplain, there isn't a lot of value to that land, and it's not something that for our development at this time that works and allows for a good cost benefit analysis to bring that portion of the property into the project. We wish that was not the case, but upon further review and consideration by our team, we don't think that that's going to be something that works at this time. If we find an avenue or an opportunity to bring that into the development, we'll of course come back before the village board with excitement to be able to bring that into the development and further enrich that area.
Understood. Had to ask.
Understood.
But other than that, the project is, as President Horker said, exciting for this village. It's different. It's something that we have not seen the likes of here before or in the surrounding area. So we're excited to have something like this in our town.
And we're excited to be here and have this opportunity as well. And we look at Chicago, and there really isn't another asset or opportunity like this as well. So,
thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Lang. Trustee Papantos?
Did you want to do your presentation before I mean, some of my questions may be answered if you have a presentation.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's really, I'll kind of leave that up to the board. I'll be honest, it's a little bit of a lengthier presentation. I know that you've been listening to some items not related to this project for some time during this presentation. I'm happy to give a full presentation to you and the rest of the board. I guess I'm going to leave that open. I will admit, it's like 15 to 20 minutes. I mean, I talk reasonably fast, but at the same time, there's quite
Are there serious concerns on my left here?
I just have some questions. I don't know if everybody needs to hear the presentation.
I just have some questions too. Probably not.
I know somebody probably spent a lot of time putting this together.
It was me.
It
was me, guys.
For this. Let's try and just answer the questions, shall we?
All right. I like that approach, and then if I feel like all of a sudden there's too many questions, then I'll start to go from there.
Trustee Vogel, you had a question?
No.
No. Are you good?
No, I have questions then. Right. Sorry.
Here you go.
Thank you. How many people, you have other sites in other states, correct?
Correct, we do.
And how many people do you expect to frequent the site, especially at the third shift hours, the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m.?
That's an excellent question. So realistically, the way we view those hours is it's not someone who's coming to the site. They're not coming there all of a sudden at 1 a.m., 2 a.m. and deciding, I want to go to the spa at that time. We don't see that a lot with our other facilities. What we really do see is somebody who comes in there at, let's say, 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. They come there at the very end of maybe a dinner hour, and they decide to stay for a while. And so what the opportunity really is for that extended time period so you don't feel rushed. So you don't come in there at 9 or 10, you start having a conversation, maybe you bring your family with you, your significant other, and you say, you know, let's relax, let's enjoy our meal, and then all of a sudden you're sitting there and you're enjoying one of the many amenities that's present on the project, and then all of a sudden you're there for, I think we all know how that happens with conversations, you're there for a couple hours. And if this facility was closing at midnight, all of a sudden you're being asked to leave early. Maybe your conversation's not quite done. Maybe you're there visiting family, friends that you don't get to see. So what we believe this really allows for is kind of the freedom to extend that visit a little bit longer. And realistically, we don't see it as somebody who's coming there in the wee hours of the morning. It's really for that extended time period. It's not something that would be frequented often. But it is an extra amenity that might be available for our residents our patrons of the facility.
One of my concerns was that you show in the packet that you expect 5 to 7 employees on the third shift, and that the spa areas, and there are quite a few spas, would be open 24 hours. And my question is leading to an item of safety. I guess that's the topic of for the evening. And if you have people using, I think there were 8 different types of spas.
Right, and all those spas are located on the second floor. So they're all centrally located in one location realistically. The pool areas, which end up being closed down at, here, let me try if I can get to the hours here. See, this is the lengthy presentation here.
I like what you did with that slide.
Let's see here. Perfect. Wait. I anticipated what I thought would be the stuff we talked about the most here. Okay. Here we go. So here's the amenities that are actually open 24 hours. So the lobby and the lobby attendant is open 24 hours, somebody who's there to address any needs. The locker room for the changing facility, and then the sauna valley area. So realistically, this sauna valley area is these facilities here. These are open 24 hours. Your seating areas, because they're a common space area, are open 24 hours. You can't really close those down. Same with the seating area up here. And then these relax zone areas, a place where, again, you can hold a conversation or relax for a little bit at the end of a long day. Those are open 24 hours. And this infrared zone, because again, this is somewhat of a common area. So we think it's pretty localized in terms of areas that are actually open 24 hours. In terms of staffing, we're always concerned with safety too. It's not something that we take lightly. It's important for us. It's important for anybody who's using the facility. If there was seen as a need that more employees would be warranted, we would use more employees. But one of the things that, is being utilized at this facility that is really exciting is we've recently developed an app that allows for people who come into the facility, will basically, essentially before they get there, they'll be able to purchase or pay for the ability to come into the facility. You'll get a wristband, and associated with that kind of allows for a little bit of a security measure on our end as well to help understand how many people may be at the facility and what amenities they may be trying to use. So that kind of allows for us to better make sure that everything's secure as we enter into the 24-hour portion. And again, the 5 to 7 employees, there's also additional cleaning staff that may be utilized as well. So we don't see that as necessarily a concern from our other facilities that are open 24 hours.
What are the duties of those 5 to 7 employees? Obviously, there's somebody at the desk.
Correct.
On the first floor, but so then for the other?
They're essentially walking and monitoring the area and helping out anyone who is still remaining there and providing the service and making sure that everyone is, enjoying their stay at the Spa Forest.
I mean, because of all the different saunas, and that's where my concern is coming in, that it doesn't seem that you really have enough staff to.
Again, I guess I would say is for the saunas that are available, they're all centrally located in this one area on the second floor. Those are the ones that are open 24 hours. One person could easily patrol this area without any issue, and you could be checking into those rooms. You'd be able to look into them once every 5 minutes. I mean, it's not a large area in terms of the sauna areas that are open 24 hours. I understand your concern, however.
What's the age limit on the saunas? Is there you have to be a certain age to use a sauna?
We would be following any state restrictions as it relates to that.
Okay. I don't know off the top of my head if there are restrictions.
There are restrictions, yes.
Okay, thank you. I mean, it's a beautiful rendering of what you plan to do with the building, and I thank you that you're taking an interest in willing to develop an area that has been, well, it's been here for a long time, and it's showing its age, so.
Correct.
I think that's it. And once again, you mentioned MWRD for permitting. Do you have to go through IDOT also?
So IDOT, we had reached out to initially and showed them our site plan and said this is what we intend on doing on the site. They replied with comments that had requested for both of the accesses to be restricted to right-in, right-outs as a result of us doing work within the right-of-way. So we had originally eliminated one of the entrances as part of the project. We are now in discussions with IDOT in terms of how to limit any impact as it relates to the current accesses to the site, knowing that that would impact potentially the ability to use the site. Those discussions are ongoing. We had received that comment letter from IDOT shortly before the Plan Commission meeting, the first one. So we're still continuing that discussion. IDOT, the process with them takes a little bit of time, unfortunately. And our goal is going to be to make sure that whatever we do adheres to IDOT. It's not something that we're going to ignore, and it's something that we will address during the permitting process as we move forward.
So someone coming from the north or from the west, how would they get into the building?
Our point exactly if they're restricting the accesses. Like I said, it's an ongoing discussion with IDOT to make sure that that doesn't hamper the overall performance of the development.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Papantos. Trustee Rufato?
Thank you. Do you have a, so your presentation doesn't go completely to waste, do you have a rendering of what it's going to look like for
Yes,
out here?
we do. Do you want to see the video?
I'm not sure we want to go to video, but if you have a rendering, that'd be great.
Yeah.
That's somebody that we could see.
Yep.
How long is the video?
No, this is, I stopped just, so here's the renderings.
How long is the video?
3 minutes.
Wait.
Do it. All right, let's do it.
Video. Play the video.
All right, let's go for it.
Thank you, Luca. Thank you, John.
Just so we're not here in silence, I'll talk through the video, but most of it kind of is self-explanatory.
No soundtrack?
No soundtracks, I'm sorry. Next time around. So this gives you an overview of exactly what it's going to look like and what you experience as you go through this development. So you'll be dropped off at the front. You'll walk in through this main entrance. You can see how the lobby is oriented. On the left are some kiosks. This would be where the wristbands and where you're kind of working with your pay information. To the right would be the information desk. This opens directly to the left is the massage area, the lavender massage, which has a lounge, and then it also has a individualized rooms and a corridor over there to the rear. So this allows for, this is open, I believe, from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. In the central area is where your lockers are. This is where the changing areas are located. And then this is actually a little bit, we'll call it to the right. And then you make your way upstairs, and this is the second floor. There's an indoor pool. There's some water features, as you can see. And there's also, as you can see, the third floor overlooks the second floor indoor pool area as well. And then this is the sauna zone that we were kind of discussing previously. You can see how they're individualized rooms, each of them offering a different sauna experience. These are various sauna opportunities from the ice room, the Himalayan salt room, gold room. Each of these experiences a little bit of a different finish, a little bit of a different feel, and resolves in the unique experience you get here.
What are those chairs?
What? Within the pool?
That's all right, don't, sorry, yeah,
Within the
those,
pool?
the round ones.
What?
The little round chairs to the right.
These? Those?
That's okay, no,
Pots.
sorry.
They're probably indoor pots.
Okay.
Or plants. Sorry, okay.
Sorry.
No, no, it's fine. Keep the questions coming as they occur. And then on the second floor as well, besides just the sauna areas, there's the men's bath and scrub area, as well as the men's dry sauna. This is reflected as well with a women's spa area, or sorry, women's scrub area and a women's dry sauna. We're showing here what you might experience when you're in this spa enjoying the warm indoor temperatures while looking outside. And then in the exterior, we have the outdoor pool deck area. This takes advantage of the views out to the Des Plaines River and is surrounded by a glass railing that will maintain safety while also allowing for the views. So this kind of gives you a feel of what the outdoor pool looks like. It's kind of got that infinity pool aspect to it, with the water temperature being 98 degrees throughout the year. Then you slide inside, there's an aqua bar. Oh, slide back for a sec. There's an aqua bar area. Oh, perfect. And then there's a juice bar over here. Both of these share that common seating area. Both the juice bar is open till noon, and then the aqua bar is open essentially in the afternoon to the evening. Then up to the third floor, again, you can see these rooms that are sporadic throughout the third floor, the relax zones, the foot and body massage area. You've got a business lounge. These are kind of that open space concept for all of these rooms. And then an infrared zone which overlooks the second floor pool area, along with, again, these relax zones. And then finally, you've got the seating area for the sushi bar, which is, again, targeting kind of that afternoon to evening crowd. It's got a full kitchen behind it, and it is offered as an amenity of people visiting the spa. And then this kind of gives you a feel for what the nighttime view is like. Again, you've got it well lit through all these existing windows. You'll have some lighting on the south, east, and west sides, and as we're aware of the residences to the north, we'll be trying to minimize any lighting on the north side. And that is our Spa Forest. It's a much abbreviated version of the entire presentation.
Thank you, that's helpful. So my only question is around the hours. We have the spas open 24 hours.
Correct.
But your shower area is only open until 2. So how do you reconcile that? How do you reconcile if somebody's in a sauna at 4 o'clock in the morning and they want to take a shower and they're only open until 2? How does that get reconciled?
We have to clean the shower areas.
Understood.
Yeah.
So somebody that wants to take a shower can't until they open up at 6 o'clock? Is that what you're saying?
That is how our hours currently are explained, yes.
Just seems, just doesn't seem right. You know, if somebody's going to be sitting there waiting 2 hours to have a shower, or even if they're done at 3 o'clock in the morning. I don't understand the concept of 24 hours when most of the facility is closed, especially the saunas. I don't understand why those would be open for 24 hours. That's my only comment.
Okay.
Thank you, Trustee Rufato. Any other, Trustee Lang? No? Yeah. Trustee Papantos, follow up there?
Sorry, just for clarification, on the sushi bar and the juice bar, only someone who's paid for admittance. In other words, I'm going down the street and say I feel like sushi, that's a no.
You can certainly feel like sushi. It's just going to cost you the extra admittance fee to get in to use the sushi. So it's going to be we would say a very expensive sushi experience. Unless you also want to enjoy the rest of what we're offering. Unfortunately, no, you cannot just come in just to have sushi. That's not the intent of the restaurant.
Thank you.
If there are no other questions or concerns, I think it's a fascinating concept. I'm sure the hours, things like the showers, I'd say it's probably a legitimate concern, but I would bet as it evolves, you'll sort out what you need to have. If there are no other questions or concerns about the issue, we do want to consider both individual ordinances. Ordinance A, granting special use to permit a day spa with submersion pools at 350 East Dundee Road, Spa Forest. There are 5 conditions. Do I have to read them into this, or can we just list that there are 5 conditions that we've...
You don't have to read them. I mean, they're in the ordinance, and in fact, there's only 1 in the special use ordinance and 4 in the site plan. I mean, historically, we do read the conditions, but it's not absolutely necessary.
So listed as read. So moved. Motion, Trustee Lang, second. Yes?
Papantos?
I'm not sure. Papantos, Trustee Papantos. Roll call, please.
Trustee Vogel?
Yes.
Trustee Lang?
Yes.
Trustee Papantos?
Yes.
Trustee Rufato?
No.
Trustee Vito?
Yes.
President Horker?
Yes. And then we have Ordinance B, granting major site plan and
Just a
appearance.
second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Go ahead and read it then. Sorry.
Okay. Granting major site plan and appearance approval for a building addition and related site improvements at 350 East Dundee Road, Spa Forest. Need a motion for the approval?
So moved.
Motion, Trustee Vogel, second.
Second.
Trustee Papantos, roll call, please.
Trustee Vogel?
Yes.
Trustee Lang?
Yes.
Trustee Papantos?
Yes.
Trustee Rufato?
No.
Trustee Vito?
Yes.
President Horker?
Yes. Welcome.
Thank you very much. We look forward to working with you and the rest of the village staff.
3, 4. Okay.
All right, C.
Item C, resolution approving the airport layout plan for Chicago Executive Airport.
Mr. Harris, Mr. Abbott, come on up.
evening, sir.
Good evening. I do have a couple questions I'd like to start with, if that's all right. Well, I'm sure everybody has some questions. This has been a sort of a heated issue for the last few weeks, and we're going to do some clearing up tonight, and we're going to hopefully get some direction. What exactly is the document we're approving? Pretty simple question, basically, but what is it?
Sure. It's called we call it the ALP, which is the Airport Layout Plan. It's a very technical document. It's the result of several years of master planning for the airport. The master plan is really a broad study of the future of the airport, and really a product of the master plan is the ALP itself. The ALP is a very technical document. It's a set of maps, as well as technical stuff like obstruction and airspace and so forth. But it's the one document that comes to both the village and the city for approval. And it's really a 5 to 10 year set of plans. That's kind of how we kind of set our development of the airport in those chunks. The master plan is more of a 20 to 30 year document. And the ALP is, the shelf life on that is, it's about 10-year max. The last ALP was approved in 2009, so we're due for.
Did everything on the last ALP come to fruition?
Not everything, but if you look at the kind of an overlay of the airport before the last ALP and then today, most of the stuff follows the plan. And how that's done is you take the ALP and you request projects that may be AIP eligible, and that means eligible for federal funds, and you request those to the state of Illinois. So even though they're on the ALP, we still need to seek approval from the FAA and the state on some of the major projects.
One of the issues with this runway 624 is money for upkeep. Well, there seems to be debate as to whether or not there is funding available for the upkeep of 624. If you had to seek federal money for this, is it possible there's federal money for the upkeep of 624?
You want to jump in here, Craig? It's a technical AIP handbook question, and I'll let kind of Craig get into that. AIP handbook is kind of the guideline for the FAA on how they fund airport projects. And so it falls within that AIP handbook guidelines, and there was a current update. So I'm going to let Craig answer. It's kind of a technical question, but.
So runway 624 is considered an additional runway by the airport. You have a primary, by the FAA. You have a primary runway, which in CEA's case is runway 1634, which is the longest runway. You have a crosswind runway, which by the FAA definition is designated as runway 1230, which is the next longest and next widest runway on the airfield. And then the third runway is runway 624, which according to FAA guidance is designated as an additional runway and is not eligible for federal funding.
So the being designated as a crosswinds runway isn't subject to the actual orientation of the runway to each other, or to the wind?
Sure. So the way FAA defines crosswind is not necessarily a runway that is perpendicular to another runway, but they define it as a runway that is of such an orientation to get the total airport wind coverage above the FAA minimum of 95%. So in the case of Chicago Executive, the layout of runway 1634 running generally north-south and runway 1230 running generally northwest-southeast is sufficient to eclipse the 95% standard that FAA designates. So all that they're, by crosswind, again, it's not the direct perpendicular orientation, but rather to the minimum to get you above that threshold.
And back to the issue of the money, federal funding for this, there seems to be confusion or contradiction on whether or not there could be some federal assistance to provide funding for 624 because of its designation.
Yeah, so runway 624 was last rehabilitated in 2011, and the airport paid for that 100% local. There was not a single dollar of federal or state investment in that runway in 2011. And that direction has continued on, and we do not anticipate the next maintenance or repair cycle of that runway to be eligible for federal funding.
There was no federal money for it then?
Correct.
The CMT, Crawford, Murphy, and Tilley work at the direction and discretion of the board. How is it, what kind of instruction were they given when they came up with, what was the original instruction to Crawford, Murphy, and Tilley relative to, here's what you're going to be doing? Just, I don't need a half an hour. I would like 200 words or less.
Sure. So
Either one of you.
CMT was tasked with developing an airport master plan update for Chicago Executive Airport. And so the process by which a master plan is developed is a prescribed FAA process. There is what's called an FAA advisory circular that governs the progression of a master plan. And in that progression, one of the many things that is taken a look at is the runway system at the airport. So you look at the wind coverage of the runway system, you look at the wind coverage of individual runways, and you look at wind coverage of combinations of runways. You also look at the length, the width, the compliance with standards, the capacity of the airfield, all of the various things that are listed in that FAA advisory circular related to the runway layout. And so it was through that runway analysis portion of the master plan combined with the taxiway and the other airfield components that led to this determination and this recommendation by CMT to show runway 62 floor as closed on the airport layout plan.
When was the first time it was proposed that 624 might be closed?
I asked Craig that question in the back because I remember at the joint meeting on July 11th, we presented exhibits to the public that showed the decommissioning of 624. So I heard earlier that it was the first time that it had been discussed in the last few weeks, but it was at the July 11th public meeting, and we asked for comments at that meeting. So we did show it to the public. It's not a, we're not trying to surprise anyone with the decommissioning.
What type of community outreach was done? I mean, I know there have been community leaders outreaches. There have been open houses. Did any invitations or notice go out specifically to the airport, or just in general? Was it y'all come kind of things?
Yeah, well, it was a combination of things. We did, and I think through the whole process, we had 4 public open houses. We have
going back how far?
Oh boy, going back. So the master plan has been going on since 2014, so almost 6 years. And in that process, there have been 4 public meetings. There was a what was called a stakeholder involvement group, a SIG group that was formed, and a representative of SEPA was part of that SIG group. And that's the meeting where we had public officials and really leadership from all facets of government and representation get in the same room and talk about runway configurations. And that was the time we were discussing longer runways or how can we reconfigure runways. And that was really the biggest, broadest discussion of how can we best utilize the assets and the space that we have at the airport. And so that's when all of those ideas were kind of thrown out. And then at that July 11th public meeting. And then again, at the joint meeting in September, these exhibits were presented. And so there was an opportunity for the public, and that includes everyone in the public, to submit comments and so forth. So so we did our due diligence on getting public input on it.
In the event that this plan is approved as it's presented today, do you go out tomorrow and plow up the runway?
No, sir. That's not the process. And I want to correct that misperception that some people may have. This is not a Meigs Field situation, if I could borrow that term.
Sure. He's out of office.
Yes, right. So we don't go tomorrow or when the city of Prospect Heights next considers this AOP and send out the earth movers to remove the runway. That's not quite the process, and Craig, you can chime in here, but there's an FAA form, 7480, that there's an FAA process. FAA has to review this and approve it.
What does that mean?
It's a standard form. It's sort of like an airspace review, but it's an official document for closing an airport, closing a runway. What else, Craig?
Essentially, runways are published. Runway statistics and runway data is published on a whole host of aeronautical charts around the country. And so the 7480 form starts the process to update those charts to indicate the revised layout of the airport.
So it is an FAA review. And then secondly,
The FAA review, is the public involved in the FAA review?
the public is, I'm not sure if they're involved in the FAA review, but there is a NEPA process. So the public is.
What is that?
I'm sorry. I'm talking in terms, go ahead.
Okay. So
Use the long words, forget the alphabet stuff with us. I don't know what that is.
All right, so to start from the top, by approving the airport layout plan, you're approving the preferred development concept shown. This is planning. As you mentioned at the top, there will not be earth movers out there tomorrow morning carving X's in the runway if you approve the airport layout plan tonight. Approving the airport layout plan does not commit or provide any funding for any of the improvements shown, nor does it mean that the runway has to be closed. It's essentially a plan that allows the airport the flexibility to advance projects shown on the airport layout plan in the future, should they desire. In order to receive any funding going forward, the project has to be justified to the FAA. It has to meet their eligibility criteria. We anticipate that a future runway closure would meet FAA criteria for funding for closure because it is a safety improvement. But it also means that it has to be environmentally cleared. And that's what Jamie was referring to. He uses the acronym NEPA, which stands for the National Environmental Policy Act. It's a federal law requiring any project on federal lands to run through an environmental process. Because the land at Chicago Executive Airport was purchased with federal funds, it falls under the NEPA umbrella. Therefore, any removal of a runway, any closure of a runway would be run through an environmental analysis. And one of the elements of that environmental analysis is a public hearing. So at a certain point in time, should the airport decide to move forward with the project, the NEPA process or the environmental process would have a public hearing associated with it. Does that help a little bit with the process? And then Jamie mentioned there's also some paperwork in terms of a 7480 form that he mentioned.
Yes. There was mention in one of the letters I received that for 624 to remain open, it would require a comprehensive renovation. What is a comprehensive renovation? By 2024 or 2025?
Sure. Similar to what we just did to runways 1230 this past year in October.
Remind me.
Sure. And it's basically a mill and overlay of the pavements. Asphalt only lasts 15, 20 years, and it's been a while since that runway's been rehabbed. So that's due for a rehab similar to 1230, which was a mill down of the pavement, an overlay. The circuit is pretty old, so new lights, new signs, new regulator, and so forth. Craig, I think you estimated if you scale down sort of the 1230 project that we did last year and applied it to 624, we're talking about $1 million. About 1.1 million to rehab that. And again, that'll be local dollars that we can, with our limited resources, we could use other places.
Thank you. And thank my trustees for your indulgence of allowing me to go first. Now I will open up the floor.
Are we doing a presentation or are we just?
Do you have a presentation?
I do, if you want to see it.
Let's see your presentation.
Right. Magic.
Did you provide it to Luca ahead of time?
I believe so.
Luca said he doesn't have it.
He doesn't have it. Okay. I can go off some notes if you'd like.
Sure. Ask our questions.
A lot of these things we did cover, President Horker.
Okay.
And trustees. But the ALP is part of the master planning process, and it's the document that really governs the next 20 years and the projects ahead. There are a couple of things that go to the FAA. That's the ALP, and there's also GIS information that goes to the FAA for review and approval. Just a little, I won't try to bore you too much with the history of the master plan and the ALP, but really we're going back to 1984 before the communities purchased the airport and commissioned the master plan. Then Airport in 2014 commissioned another master plan. It had been about 30 years and it was due. And then here we are today with the culmination of that master plan with, before you with an updated airport land. About 6 years, $1.5 million worth of work, included 30 professionals, airport engineers, planners, pilots, 20-plus user meetings, 4 open houses, a stakeholder involvement group. So it's been a large process worked on by many professionals in the industry. And in the end, when we finish the master plan and kind of publish it, it will be eligible for reimbursement by the FAA up to 90% money back to us. So the AOP really represents 3 goals for us: improve safety through taxiway and runway reconfigurations, to maintain the excellent financial health that the airport, as you know, has enjoyed since the purchase of the airport from the Priester family. We make enough money on the airport to remain financially self-sufficient, and we want to keep it that way. One of the ways we can have success with that is take the asset that we have and maximize the forecasted growth in the airport and develop accordingly. We're projecting about 1 million square feet of total hangar space in the new ALP. Again, that goes out 20 or so years, and it's really driven by the demand. It's not that we approve a plan and issue an RFP and all this gets built. It's really driven by demand of new development. Let's see, about approximately 2 million square feet of total development, and that is taxiways, ramps, access roads, and so forth. No expansion beyond I think this is important, there's no expansion beyond the 4 roads of the airport. So anything beyond Milwaukee, hence Wolf and Palatine Road, we've worked within those lines, so to speak, and that was really the governing rules that we set.
Yes, I was there.
Sure. I have the maps. Unfortunately, I can't put them up on the screen for you. There we go. We brought a big board.
These?
Yes, sir.
No.
Craig, can hold that up for you.
There was some question as to whether or not reconfiguration of these runways was still going to leave hotspots on the taxiways, I believe.
I know. Sorry, the audience can't see. So if I can kind of point to the map, sorry if it's hard for you to see way back there, but kind of the color codes is the new orange squares are new hangar development. Black squares or rectangles are existing hangars. So the orange squares represent that additional million square feet that I was mentioning earlier.
How is it determined, how is it determined when you're going to be building a new hangar?
Like I said, it's all demand driven. So if there is a demand for new hangar space, this gives us the plan and the roadmap to get there. So if we need to build a new taxiway or a ramp to accommodate future hangar development, this is the guide map to get us there.
Does the airport build hangars on spec?
We don't really build hangars. The airport is not in the building business. We did build T hangars, but as far as larger corporate hangars, we're really the landlords of the airport. So we'll lease the ground, and then a private developer will build the hangar themselves.
Thank you.
Sure.
Kind of going, I'm going to step away from the mic here. Do I have the other one?
It's on. It's on.
All right. So I'm going to kind of go quadrant by quadrant here. Northeast quadrant, you can see our administration building, if you've been there, is this building here. We're proposing that goes away, and then new taxiway development.
If I may.
Sure.
Just so that everybody can see what you're doing, can you maybe approach from the other side?
Yes, sir.
Because the camera's.
Sure. Got it. In administration building here, that will eventually go away. This is in the object-free area, so it's important that we eventually relocate our offices. New taxiway development down the northeast quadrant here. Here's the existing T-hangars with...
Can you point out where industrial lane is, please?
Sure, I can. Industrial lane, current industrial lane is about right here. So we show a new access road here going to the tie-down area and the T-hangars. New access road off of Milwaukee here, servicing these hangar buildings. And then Sumac Road, we show that existing here. Around Tower Road, the Charlie pad, Hawthorne's new hangar is located here, and there's new proposed development down the taxiway Charlie to the west here. Here's the control tower.
Can you show me where 624 is?
Yep, I sure can. 624 runs right about here. Here's the approach in right at Milwaukee Avenue, and it follows this direction here. New hangar development here, following the Charlie taxiway. The current area 2 and 3 tie downs become hangar development, and then the tie downs get relocated up to the north side. This is Hawthorne's current FBO.
Can you go back to the administration building? You were removing that,
Yes, ma'am.
and where are you putting it?
We've got several locations that we're proposing we could move administration. One is here by the control tower that's currently shown as a hangar that could be administration. One is east of hangar 20 here. That could be an administration building. That's right on Milwaukee Avenue. So there's several spots that you see an orange square that could be either a hangar or an administration building in the future. We are proposing a change to runway 1230, widening it from 75 feet, its current width, to 100 feet. No change to the main runway, of course.
Where's the customs building?
Sure. The future customs building is right here, this orange square. This is the existing hangar 4. Hangar 4 will be demolished here in the next few weeks. This is a whole new, the southwest quadrant open, the decommissioning opening of 624 would open this whole quadrant up for new development, all these new hangar facilities. Some reconfiguring of some taxiways in this area to make them standard with current FAA standards. And then kind of completing the quadrant up here in the northwest quad. Here's the Atlantic complex, and then one last hangar north of their existing buildings would kind of complete this quadrant of the airport. So that's kind of a broad overview of the future ALP.
Trustees, all right. Is that about
Yes,
wind
sir.
up what you've got?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Trustee Lang, followed by Trustee Rufato.
Thank you. So, okay, you're talking about hangar plans now, but, there was hangar redevelopment in all over Industrial Lane and that area. That includes waste management and a few other places. So explain, either Jamie or Craig, if you can explain that. That's not something, again, that we're looking at tomorrow. That's something that should the space become available, and I'll let you finish that.
So, yeah, so the airport layout plan is depicting that the airport is fully owning the industrial park and is going to, at some point, potentially build some hangars up there. The intent of that was to be laid out in a way that would allow the airport to I was in stereo, I'm sorry. The intent of that was that the development could be sequential. It's to allow the airport to capitalize on opportunities as they arise in terms of acquisition of parcels in the industrial park. In talking to the airport, we acknowledge that the full acquisition of waste management is going to be a steep hill to climb in terms of that, moving that land use. So the way the development is laid out there is that the northern portion of that could be built over time, even if waste management is never acquired by the airport long term. So again, this is a plan. It's an aspirational plan that depicts how the airport would like to develop should the demand be fully realized going forward.
And as we talked about very early in this process, it's more of communities would know it as a comprehensive plan.
Correct.
For the airport. So it's a layout going 20 years forward, 20 plus, to see if the space was available, what could we do with it?
Correct. And the challenge that the airport has is the forecast of aviation demand, the projections of future-based aircraft and future operations at this airport are fairly aggressive. We anticipate nearly 100 new based aircraft being located at this airport over a 20-year period. And it's been the airport's desire that's been expressed to us, and what we've put together this plan is to try to accommodate those based aircraft. And given the four boundaries of the roadways adjacent to the airport, it's a challenge to fit all of those aircraft in that particular footprint. And so situations like the industrial park are being looked at to try to accommodate that forecasted demand, should it be realized.
And I believe in Wheeling's comprehensive plan that is industrial, but also leaning towards airport use as well.
That's correct.
So when Wheeling did the comprehensive plan back in 2003, and it was approved, that land was all designated as industrial, because it was industrial, but eventually airport use. And so it takes a long time,
Sure does.
which is my point. It's not something that we see is going to happen tomorrow. It would be nice if some things worked out that way, but it doesn't always work out that way, and that's fine. So leads me to then talk about 624. So there are plenty of hangars in the space of 624. Again, we built a brand new hangar. Hawthorne built a brand new hangar last year, and that's right off Milwaukee Avenue, off the it's near Tower Road. Yep. And then Atlantic just announced that they're building a new hangar, and that's off of Hintz and near Wheeling. Hintz and Wolf. And so two new hangars, but that's rare because the last time a hangar was built was probably 5 years prior to that, correct? So we don't have a huge demand for hangars, but it's nice to see a few of them are starting to get built. Okay, so are we using 624 as a, let's get rid of it now because we want the space? Is that part of what you guys are looking at?
So runway 624 is being looked at from a variety of perspectives. I think the first place that we jumped to as we ran through the prescribed list of master planning steps per the FAA criteria is that FAA has been funding what they call runway incursion mitigation projects since 2015. They use the acronym RIM, and it's a program that's been nationwide where they're trying to reduce runway incursions on airfields. FAA defines a hotspot as a location on the airfield that can increase the probability of a runway incursion. And as has been previously discussed, FAA takes safety very seriously, and they put their money behind their aspirations for additional airfield safety. So they've been funding hotspot removal projects across the country. It's been primarily at commercial service airports thus far, but we do anticipate that requirement does trickle down to general aviation airports going forward. So it's for that reason that we recommended that the airport take a look at runway 624 as an opportunity to remove all 3 hotspots in one particular project. There are 3 hotspots on the airfield. They're all adjacent or caused by runway 624. And so by potentially removing the runway gets rid of all 3 hotspots.
Okay. And good segue into the hotspot I wanted to talk about. So there has been some talk that that it's taxiway that's the issue, not necessarily runway. Is it a combination of both that is a problem with 624 taxiway and runway itself?
Correct. The taxiway geometry at hotspot number 1 is not, does not meet FAA criteria, but it's the presence of that taxiway geometry directly adjacent to a runway that is what leads it to become a hotspot. Case in point, there is a other 5-node intersection, a 5-leg intersection, essentially a intersection where a pilot is faced with 4 choices as they approach the intersection, which instead of 3 choices, which is the FAA standard. There's another location of that near Hangar 10 on the other side of the airfield, but because that particular intersection is located a little bit further from a runway, it's not designated a hotspot. It's a hotspot at hotspot number 2, or hotspot number 1, I'm sorry, because of its proximity to runway 624.
Okay, so passing this ALP tonight would open the door for this to be looked at. It's not an automatic by any means. Okay, so walk us through what are you going to be looking at in particular, and then I'll ask how will some of our tenants and other folks that have an interest in it be part of that?
Sure. As I mentioned before, we're requesting your consideration tonight to approve a plan. It's a planning document. As we mentioned, there are additional steps that need to be taken, one of which is an FAA-guided environmental screening that will include a public hearing. So that would be the next significant step in the process. Should the airport decide to advance the project, it needs to go through an environmental review. After that, after the environmental review and the public hearing is complete, then the airport would need to seek funding for that project from the FAA or the state of Illinois, and then at that point they could move down the road to design and construction.
Okay, and so public hearing means public testimony?
Correct.
Okay, so folks will be able to be heard at that point of their argument as opposed to what you guys are saying are consultants?
Correct.
Okay. And so at that point, the public will be heard, both sides will be heard, in other words. Due process, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. You know, I appreciate the passion that you folks have, and I believe that there will be folks that will be heard, and I believe that there's 2 sides to this story. There's a safety issue that CMT is telling us that the airport has on the runway incursion zones, okay, and then there's the safety concerns that the pilots have on the crosswinds. So will you be uncovering which is the biggest safety concern? Which is the one that affects every user on that airport every day? For the greater good or for the few times that it's used? What are you going to uncover with that?
So that specific question is not answered during the NEPA process, but I do think that we've made our professional recommendation as to what we believe the future airport layout plan of Chicago Executive should be, and I think that's depicted on the map behind me here.
Okay. And Trustee Lang, if I may, just to kind of recapture the safety message a little bit, there's 2 perspectives to safety, and I appreciate the passion of the SEPA pilots and the single engine or light aircraft pilots in general. In my time as flight training, I understood crosswinds, and so I totally understand the concern here. But like I said, there's 2 perspectives on safety. We as an airport operator are in charge of safety on the ground and running a safe airport. I purposely, when I first started at the airport as the assistant airport manager and would run people through driver training, I would purposely run them through this intersection, this hotspot number 1 intersection, because it was a true test of their ability to drive on the airport. And that training doesn't last a week. We go through months of training before somebody is signed off to drive on the airport. And this complex intersection where it meets 624 and all the other taxiways and so forth is the biggest challenge to anyone in an airplane or a vehicle on this airport. So if I have a chance to remedy that, it's not just for pilots and airplanes, it's for fuel trucks, and it's for our operations guys on the airport. So my responsibility is creating a safe airport environment. I understand a pilot's concern, but a pilot is ultimately the command of the aircraft and makes decisions based on weather conditions and so forth. So I can speak to the safety of running a safe airport and operations, and I'll leave the pilot side to them.
Well, just lastly, I want to say is I want to trust the process. I think that this is the start of this process, and I want to start it and trust it. We add commissioners and directors to various commissions and Plan Commission and Senior Commission and so on in this community because we need their help. We need folks like that to do a lot of the groundwork for this board. And I want to trust those people and trust that they're getting the right information. Again, I want to trust CMT that you're giving the boards the right information and the honest direction of where we should go with this. And I'm going to do that. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Lang. If I may interrupt just a moment. Why can't we just adjust the taxiways? If the taxiways are the majority of the hotspot issues, why can't you just reconfigure taxiways?
Yeah, and I think there is an opportunity to do that on 1, maybe 2 of the hotspots, but there is a third that likely can't be rectified without runway 624. But I think that also then gets into a little bit of the funding and the some of the airport local only funds that we've talked about previously.
So it's a possibility, but it's a funding issue. Thank you, sir. I'm sorry, Mr. Rufato. You're next.
Sorry, thank you. One of the comments that seems to be in conflict, and you started talking about it, but I would just like a little bit more detailed information about the FAA standard of the minimum 95% wind coverage. You indicate that closing this will not lower that percentage, but what we heard from a dialogue is that it would. So can you please explain that in a little bit more detail?
Sure. So the process that we go through for wind analysis is a prescribed process by the FAA. We used 10 years of weather data that was taken directly from the weather station at Chicago Executive Airport. FAA has an online wind rose calculation tool that they require master planning projects to use for wind analysis. So the process, it's a very straightforward one. You take the downloaded weather station data, you upload it into FAA's system, and it produces the percentage tables that you've seen in the various documents before. CMT does not have control over that process. It's an FAA calculated process that we use for our master plans.
Okay. All right. Thank you. You mentioned that you're forecasting 120 new aircraft. Is that what I heard you say?
I think it was 100. That number was taken from memory, so don't quote me on that specifically.
And that's over how long of a period of time?
20 years.
20 years. And what do you anticipate those types of planes to be?
Oh boy, you're putting me on the spot. I believe I don't remember so in our forecast document, we broke down the aircraft by single engine piston, turboprop, and then 4 different sizes of jets: light, small, medium, and large. And I believe there were The largest segments of growth were in the jet segment, and specifically in the light, medium, and large jet segment. That's where we saw, during the forecast process, the sort of the highest growth element of the Chicago executive base fleet.
And that forecast section is a FAA-approved forecast, right? And
Then funding, someone mentioned, and maybe funding has changed, funding models have changed, is that there possibility of the state funding, if 624 stayed open, that there could be, I think I heard someone say that there could be state funding. Is that something that is available?
We don't know. There's nothing been identified yet. Supposedly, there is some state funding for airports in Illinois through the Capitol bill that was passed, I think, just last year. As of today, the Division of Aeronautics in Springfield has not articulated to us how that money is going to be spent. That money is supposedly spread over, I believe, 6 to 8 years and is going to go to all of the airports in the state. So I don't know what the mechanism is for how that is going to be doled out, but my understanding is that at the very least it's going to follow the FAA process of what is eligible and what is not eligible for funding. That's the latest and greatest we're hearing, but nothing is set in stone yet.
Okay. So then, you know, we've heard a lot about the FAA, and the FAA, you know, we heard doesn't recommend closing of runways. They'll never recommend that you close something, but if you come with this public forum to say, we're thinking about closing this, then they get involved. Why wasn't the FAA engaged earlier in this process, in building our comprehensive plan, if you will, and part of it being the ALP? Why wasn't the FAA engaged in that process?
So the FAA has been engaged in the process. As Jamie mentioned before, they approved the forecast document. They have reviewed and commented on the facility requirements document, and then they have participated in all of the open houses and stakeholder involvement group meetings that have taken place thus far. The master plan team and Jamie and his staff have actually gone to Des Plaines and meet with the FAA on a number of occasions as part of the process as well, just to keep them up to speed.
Okay, cut to the chase, specific to 624. Have you specifically engaged them in a meeting about the potential of closing 624?
Not specifically about closing runway 624, but they are aware that the future airport layout plan in its draft form is showing runway 624 is closed.
Okay. So in this airport layout plan, if we approve it as is, then we get the FAA engaged then? That's how we get them engaged? You know, it seems like you're putting the cart before the horse then if you're going down that path.
Sure. The FAA will not get engaged regarding the closure of runway 624. That is the airport's decision. The FAA has a prescribed environmental process, which was where they come into play in the next step after the ALP approval, which is the environmental review. That is a prescribed process that FAA governs, and they will sign the ultimate document that's produced as part of the environmental process. But they are reviewing that from an environmental purpose, for environmental
Well,
purposes.
environmental is obviously safety. So why isn't step 13 pushed up into step 10 or something that they're engaged then if we're going down this path of thinking about closing that? I'm not intimate with the steps that you took, but it logically would seem that they should be engaged in this. And the only way we can engage them is if we approve the ALP plan. Because if we don't, then we leave it open, and then we leave it open to these hotspots. So I would, I don't know what the process is, but I'd like to see them engaged.
Yeah, and I think perhaps I'm not necessarily explaining this correct. The environmental process that FAA reviews and ultimately approves is an assessment of the environmental impacts of the project. So the document that's produced is called a finding of no significant impact, and that's what the FAA ultimately signs.
Finding of no significant impact, so that means that when we do engage them, when this is approved, can they say, yes, we should keep this open? I mean, they won't tell you to close it, but will they tell you to keep it open?
If the environmental impact of that project is significant, then yes, they can essentially assess the project as creating too large of an environmental impact and.
Right. But we can't get them engaged until we approve the ALP showing that we potentially could close this runway.
Correct.
Okay. I would like to see that. I hear the passion of the Airport Pilot Association, but it seems that the only way we can have that done is to approve the ALP as it is with the potential of closing that. And the master plan is what I'm hearing.
And if I can kind of add to Craig's remarks, through the data, through the wind data, through the operational data, CMT wouldn't suggest that we submit an ALP to the FAA that they would reject. That's just not in our best interest as an airport. That's not in your best interest either. So the FAA is, like Craig said, they're going to be reluctant to tell us what we need to do with our airport unless in critical situations where, in extreme situations where they might say, you need to close this runway or you need to keep it open. They give us the liberty of master planning to assess the situation, to look at the airport as a whole, there's the 2 or 3% of operations of this runway, and then there's the other 98 or 97% of the airport that we consider when we're master planning and we're developing an ALP. So kind of like the sausage is made in algae, we have to holistically look at what is best for this airport, and the 64 discussion is part of it.
Well, I understand. I understand it's a vision. I've been involved in many comprehensive plans on the Plan Commission. But this is nothing like I've ever seen on the Plan Commission from the standpoint of the potential of closing down an airport. And what I would like to see if this does get approved is having apparently there's some perceived lack of transparency within the and I don't know, but from where I'm sitting right now hearing this is that if there is that, then it should be improved. Okay. And with that said, that the involvement of the airport, the Pilot Association should be more active and more engaged. That would be my opinion on that. Sure. So, in this plan going forward,
Sure.
I look at this as a vision.
Yes, sir.
And the potential of the demand for these for 10 years is really out there. So it's just a vision as far as I'm concerned here.
Yes, sir.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Rufado. Trustee Papantos and then Trustee Vogel.
Thank you. And I want to start, and I apologize for the negative comment, but it would have been helpful to see a presentation. I have been at all the open houses. You know my face. You've seen me at many airport meetings. You've seen me here. And I know for a fact that I spoke about the airport layout plan at the last open house in July, okay? At our joint meeting, I brought up the fact that, you know, I'm on Medicare now, okay? You know, you give us documentation that I'm trying to blow up and, you know, I expand it, I can barely read it. I would have appreciated a little bit more insight onto this, just as a comment. I want to start with Milwaukee Avenue and Industrial Lane, just to get this done. You were at our meeting when we approved term sheet for a development on Milwaukee Avenue, right, at Sumac. And it was stated by our economic development director at that time that we hoped that this development would further spur development along Milwaukee Avenue. And according to this plan, it's dry detention, I believe, from what I could read. I have a problem with giving up major property. I want development in Wheeling because it serves a purpose for all of us and to make Wheeling a better town. So that part of the airport layout plan, I do have a problem with. Sure. I also have a problem with Industrial Lane. If you're going to buy up properties as they become available on Industrial Lane and you have the money to buy up those properties, even if they are partially funded by FAA, then why don't you have more money for the residential sound insulation program, which was threatened. If we allow to keep 624, we won't have money for residential sound, and I don't deal well with threats, to tell you the truth. Why won't we have money to rehabilitate 624, if that's the case? I'm also looking at the airport layout plan of, you know, if we look at this as future, it's part of the master plan, okay? The master plan may be compared to the comprehensive plan, but I don't consider the airport layout plan to be a comprehensive plan. It appears you do one of these every 10 years. They can be done independently without a master plan because it was done in 2009. You know, I guess my question would be, what's the hurry? Why can't we have an airport layout plan that at this point in time leaves 624 intact and leaves Milwaukee Avenue and those tax revenue generating properties intact? Because not only will demolishing waste management be an uphill climb, it's, I think we're talking close to impossible. Question, you stated that the FAA would fund the demolition of 624, but they won't fund the rehabilitation of 624?
Well, Craig, step in, but they will fund the reconfiguration of taxiways and taxiway runway intersections as part of that RIM program. Is that correct, Craig?
Yeah, so as has been mentioned before, FAA is motivated by safety, and right now they're funding programs all around the country to remove hotspots from airfields. So despite a little bit of the lack of logic of not paying for upkeep but paying for removal, that is absolutely the case. They will pay for removal if there is a tangible safety benefit to the airport in the form of removal of hotspots from the airfield.
Are they paying for elimination of hotspots at GAs, or, because I thought you said that at this point they weren't?
Sure, no, and they are, I mean, I don't have any specific examples of it, but they are The word that we hear from FAA is that they're doing it at commercial service airports all around the country, and the GAs are next. So we anticipate that, yes, the RIM program will be extended to the GAs in the near future.
We anticipate, but they haven't at this point. I just want to be clear.
Sure, not any that I'm familiar with in Northern Illinois at this point.
And I apologize, I'm very bad at names, but Mr. Dennerlein? Thank you. You mentioned the hot spots, and you had a diagram, and I don't mean to question you, but I'm hearing two different sides of a story. If 624 is demolished, will these taxiways still be there, and will all the hot spots go away because 624 is demolished, or will we still have hot spots?
If you were to take away runway 624...
You'll have to step up to the mic, sir.
Yeah. I'll remind you, I'm an engineer as well. If you were to remove runway 624 without any other remediation, all three hotspots would still be there.
Thank you. Now, CMT, can you answer the same question?
No, in my opinion, all three would be removed from the diagram.
Okay, we can't argue that, sorry. I need to know what the benefit of this is. And I am hearing conflicting stories, and I think that's somewhat important, so. Why can't the ALP, and I asked this question before, be presented in such a way that we can keep 624, keep Milwaukee Avenue at least, and Sumac, and then in the future, do another ALP if it's worthwhile?
Yeah. So we anticipate that this master plan that the airport has been going through will be reimbursed by the FAA and the state. Typically, if they have put money into a master plan and an airport layout plan, you're looking at that 10 to 12-year time window that Jamie mentioned for the opportunity to receive funding to do it again. So what you're saying is that, hey, we'll just go through another planning process when it's warranted down the road. And so I think in that scenario, the airport would be looking at using only local funding for that project. And that's number one. And then number two, Mary, we've been at this for a really long time. And so
I've been there.
these processes are not something that you identify a problem on the airport and you go through a planning process and you snap your fingers and you're able to fix it. So by the time you've identified a problem on the airfield, it's already too late. And then if you have to spend another 2 or 3 years planning to fix it, you're missing your window. The opportunity here, the airport has gone through this process over the last 5 years as a manner to be proactive, to try to identify the problems that are based on current trends in the industry, that are based on professional judgments. And we're trying to provide the airport with a document that makes them proactive in dealing with problems that we see coming down the road at the airfield. So the FAA and the state and the aviation industry, unfortunately, doesn't move fast enough to sort of make that scenario something a process we would recommend in the future.
Have we considered the fact that if we close 624, we may very well lose a lot of our piston pilots?
We don't want our piston pilots to go anywhere.
I'm assuming that.
Yeah. If you take things into perspective at a high level, and you take the 2 or 3% of operations on that runway, we don't think that's going to deter our piston community from choosing other airports to base their aircraft. We hope not. That's part of our business model. That's part of our role in the aviation system in Chicago and in the national system. So our goal is not to push anyone away. Our goal is to take this master plan and look at a holistic approach to what is best for the airport in the next 10 to 20 years. So that's really the approach we take with the 624 discussion. It's a safety discussion. It's a utilizing our assets the best way we can. And it's really just a holistic approach to planning. It's a planning document. And if I can kind of exemplify that and go back to the example or the question you had about the gas station on Milwaukee, it's kind of a timing issue where we put this ALP together and where we went through this process and we came up with this alternative. And we do depict it as detention, but the village and the city both own the airport. And if you want to put a gas station there, that's going to happen, and we'll reflect that in
Well, that's not airport property, so let's be clear that the developer came in this case, Wheeling property.
Exactly.
So it's not that we wanted to put a gas station on the airport.
Right.
A developer came to us and said, this is what we wanted, and I know I brought it up at the July open house. I absolutely know that I spoke to you about that.
And just because and going back, just because we show it as detention doesn't mean anything to Wheeling development and how you want to develop your village. So.
I understand that, but I also don't want to deter other developers from coming in who look at it and say they're really not committed to business at this point. Okay, and that's where I'm coming from. Can you describe what an environmental study for shutting down a runway entails?
Sure. So it's a study, as I mentioned before, under the National Environmental Policy Act. It considers a laundry list of environmental factors, some that will apply to this situation, others that may not, but they'll look at noise, air quality, stormwater management, floodplains, wetlands, flora and fauna, historic preservation. I'm sure there's more that I'm not getting off the top of my head, but it's a laundry list of categories that also involve various regulatory agencies. We talk to EPA, DNR, Fish and Wildlife, the Corps of Engineers, MWRD. I could keep going on with acronyms, but it's a comprehensive study that analyzes basically every environmental aspect that you can think of a project.
Does it look at safety at all?
It does not look at runway safety in the way that a master plan does.
Okay, thank you. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Rufato. Trustee Vogel, then Trustee Vito.
I know I throw my voice rather well.
I'm sorry.
Change the tenor.
I haven't heard Jim
Didn't
talk
write
that
it
much in
very
his
clearly,
lifetime.
I'm sorry.
For 40 years.
Okay.
And are you implying?
This question I want to direct to Jim, or Attorney Ferrillo. Attorney Ferrillo.
Yes.
If we vote to approve the ALP as presented to us, we have no future input in the ALP implementation. Is that correct?
Yeah, under the amended and restated IGA that we approved back in 2013, Wheeling and Prospect Heights governing the airport, there were powers that were enumerated and delegated to the municipalities and certain powers delegated to the airport board of directors. One of the powers delegated to the municipalities is the ability to approve the airport layout plan, which is why we're here and going through this. One of the powers correspondingly delegated to the airport board of directors is to implement the airport layout plan once it's approved. So relative to runway 624, if we sign off on this tonight and approve this ALP, you are delegating to the airport board the authority to deal with 624 as they deem fit, which will include going to the FAA. So once you approve the ALP, it is now in the hands of the directors to implement. So it will not come back here unless there's a specific power they need from you, which, for example, land acquisition is a power that has to be, it's reserved to the municipality. So If part of the ALP involves buying land outside of the airport, they will still have to come back to Prospect Heights and Wheeling to do that. Another power that's enumerated and delegated to the municipalities is the issuance of debt. If in the implementation of the ALP, debt needs to be issued, they're going to have to come back to us. But relative to the decommissioning of 624, that is an area that they will not have to come back to you for further input. It will now be in the hands of the airport board. They'll make that decision relative to initiating the environmental study and closing the runway. So that's the answer.
Jamie, or I guess Jamie, you said the anticipated cost of replacing, or whatever I guess you said replacing, refurbishing the runway in probably 24 or 25 was 1.1 million?
1.1 or 1.2, Craig? 1.1, that's the estimate that CMT generated.
And right now you're anticipating no federal funding for that?
No, sir.
Okay, well, what's the cost of the removal?
Craig, you could jump in here, but removal may not be done at all in one time, right?
Yeah, so
Well, over time, what's the total cost?
We have not estimated that. I don't have that number for you. I can give you a wag off the top of my head, but I prefer not.
Greg, talk in that microphone.
We don't have that number at present.
Okay, is there anything in your CIP for either one of these? Jamie?
The TIPS program, do we have anything for the mitigation yet? Yeah, we're kind of waiting on the ALP approval, and then we will include those projects in the TIPS program. The TIPS program is the 5-year capital program that we submit to the state every year for requesting those projects. So didn't want to really do the cart before the horse situation.
Okay. The federal funding you said was available to remove the runway because of the hot spots. Or it's not available to remove the runway. Now, let me rephrase the question.
Yes, sir.
You said that the federal funding was available to redo the taxiways because of the hot spots.
Yeah, Craig, jump in here, but mitigation of hotspots, if it's associated with the taxiways next to the runway, would become federally eligible. It's anticipated right now, as Craig's mentioned, they're highly concentrated on commercial service airports, but we believe that GA is not too far behind. So yeah, that would be eligible.
Well, if the hotspots are associated with the runway, why won't that be eligible to fix that?
No, it would. If it's associated, is that right, Craig?
I'm sorry, say that again?
If the hotspots are associated with the runway, which you're saying they are part of them, why wouldn't federal funds not be available to fix that problem? If it's available to fix the hotspots on the taxiways?
Sure. No, we anticipate if the airport desires to move forward with the removal of runway 624, we anticipate that federal funds would be available for that project.
I'm saying leave the runway there and fix the hotspots. Is that possible? And then, again, it's a hotspot, so there's federal funding available?
There could be, if there is a mitigation reconfiguration option that meets criteria, yes, that could be eligible for federal.
Have we looked into that?
Yes, there have been some alternatives that were presented as part of the master plan, but the selected alternative to move forward with was the alternative that showed the removal of runway 624.
Okay. Back to Trustee Rufato's point about the FAA, I too think, have we approached the FAA and said, hey, give us your opinion? Is it a safety issue? Is it better to remove the runway or is it better to fix it? Have we ever tried that? I mean, we're saying that they won't talk to us, but yeah, we're saying after we do this, they may, after we approve it. Again, that doesn't make any sense at all. And I realize it's the federal government, okay, which is difficult to understand most of the time anyway. And I worked for them at one time for a short period of time, but it just, have we tried? Have we, you know, should someone else, should our village president contact them and ask them?
Well, Trustee Vogel, was...
Volunteering you, Mr. Orker.
It's a slow time for
We'll give you their number.
Sure, they'll pick right up.
Trustee Vogel, they were involved in the master planning process, and which included the runway discussion, the alternatives. Those were presented both to the public. The FAA is aware of the alternatives, so we didn't ask them to necessarily give us the blessing or write us a letter and say yes or no, keep runway 624. But they know that the discussion has been had. We anticipate when we submit the ALP to them that it'll be approved. And so, yes, they were involved in the process. No, we didn't ask them directly, will you write us a letter, yes or no, whether to keep the runway. We didn't put them in that position.
Can we do that?
I don't think that they would answer to the affirmative or not.
Well, the only way to find out is to do it, right?
I've had the opportunity to work on a number of runway safety projects around the Midwest in my career, and even in some of the situations where there are really, really high runway incursion rates, FAA is not going to come through and tell you to close a runway. So we've provided them the opportunity that if they strongly objected to the closure of the runway that was shown on the airport layout plan, we've given them the opportunity to tell us that. By submitting the airport layout plan to them for review and approval, we're giving them another opportunity to weigh in on that topic. So we haven't, but we wouldn't recommend asking that question. We are going to give them the opportunity to comment on it through the airport layout plan submittal process.
But only after we approve it. Okay, let's move on. What's the percentage of occupancy now of the hangar space we have?
I don't know the FBO's numbers right offhand. I know our occupancy in the T hangars, they're 100%. So our hangars are 100% occupied. FBO's, I'm not intimate with their business. It's pretty high. There's a pretty high occupancy rate of hangar. And, kind of to illustrate that point, we have two FBOs that are building brand new hangars. One just approved last week, and another one that we're talking with to build another one. So at least two of our FBOs see the demand and the need to build two brand new hangars on the airport. So.
All right, that's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Vogel. Trustee Vito.
Yeah, do you have any idea what the percentages of flights on 624 are that are for crosswind specific purposes only? We're saying it's someone said 2.9%, you're saying 2%. Of that 2.9 or 2%, how many are, oh my God, I'm gonna die if I don't take this crosswind path? Do we have any idea what that is?
No, there's no hard figures on why somebody chose a runway. But if you're using that, from my experience flying, if you're using 624, it's because the winds are probably pretty close to directly down that runway. On a calm day, on a
Do you have something to say, sir? I hear you. It's very rude. I'm asking a question. Do you have something to say? Okay, speak up.
People choose runways when they're landing because of the wind. It's not arbitrary. It's not circumstantial. It's specifically because of a reaction to the weather conditions.
Okay.
So to say that it doesn't matter isn't even close to true. And to put runways that are only 40 degrees difference between the two provides no crosswinds to speak of at all. You can say it technically meets a safety limit, but in fact, it's going to cause deaths. That's okay. That's good.
I didn't say it doesn't matter. I was asking what the percentage of those landings are is because of the crosswind. Is it 100? It's 100% then?
We could assume that the 2 or 3% utilization of that runway is because the crosswinds are too strong on the other two runways.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know.
Yeah, and calm wind.
I don't fly, so. What's
Sure.
that?
In calm wind or light wind conditions, I'm not going to speak for a pilot, but they usually utilize the main runway, or 1230 is an option, so.
And of those flights that use the crosswind, that use 624 because of the crosswind, do you know what percentage of that 2 to 3% flights are these smaller planes? Is it mostly?
Mostly, I would say vast majority, 90% wise is single
And
engine piston aircraft.
are all those garaged or hangared, whatever the term might be, or are the majority of those hangared at CEA?
I would say a lot of them are.
What's the average flight trip time on a single smaller plane? How long are they normally gone for?
Yeah.
They fly. They take off and come back to CEA. Correct?
Sure. I think the range on a small single engine it's not great. It's based on how much fuel they can hold. So, hour or two.
So an hour or two.
Hour or two, probably.
Okay.
Trustee, hold on.
On average, I wasn't talking about max.
You hold on too. Sure. Do you want to grab an engineer or something and get them to rebut or debate, or do we just like tell these guys to quiet down?
I don't know.
I don't either.
They're yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean that's my question. What's the average flight time?
Yeah, it's tough to say. It depends on what they're doing. If they're just doing some training, it could be half hour, 45 minutes. If they're on a cross country, it could be longer.
Okay.
Sure.
Well, we don't know what those numbers are.
No.
Is there? I guess what I'm getting at is what is the instance where it's unavoidable, where it's unpredictable, where you're in a situation as a single engine pilot or something and you're coming back into CEA and now the winds have turned where you have to use this runway?
Sure.
To where you couldn't have forecasted that before you left?
I think the only way to gauge that is the utilization of the runway itself. So 2 to 3% of the operations at the airport utilize that runway. And really, the only reason to utilize that runway would be if you really, really need it.
All right.
That's it?
I'm good.
So we're in an odd situation here this evening. We're short a trustee. It's all right. I'd like to take a consensus. Can I do that?
You can, or you can take a vote, or one or the other.
Well, a vote is more permanent.
It is.
I've learned
It's up to you.
That's cool. I get to play in charge. Because there's a lot of, it seems like in some of the instances, the only way to move forward is to approve this thing, and there's debate about the safety, the direction of, how good is it to move forward with this? And there are questions certainly about some of the instances, some of the plans that could be implemented with this, but it also comes back to us that we do have power of the budget, if nothing else, over the plan. I just want to take a consensus. Mr. Trustee Rufato.
Yes.
Would you be in favor of moving this forward?
For the same reasons that you have said, that we need to engage the FAA, and the only way we can engage the FAA is to approve this as we see it right now, to have them do this. And so I would be in favor of it, yes. And I'm not saying that the airport, the association is wrong, or the board is wrong. We need them engaged, and we can't do that without approving this.
Thank you. Trustee Vogel, how do you feel about this?
No, not the way it is right now.
Trustee Lang?
Well, I trust the process, and I trust our board and commission members, and I trust the consultants that we use. And I believe that the right things will happen, the safest things will happen for the airport.
Thank you. Trustee Papantos?
Not at this time as written.
Trustee Vito?
Yeah, I'll approve it.
I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of people on this issue over the last couple of weeks, and a lot of emails, position papers, conversations with several of you individually. I actually agree with moving forward with this. I'm going to call for a motion to approve this plan as printed. I need a motion to approve.
So moved.
Motion
Second.
from Trustee Lang, second from Trustee Rufato. Clerk Simpson, roll call.
Trustee Vogel?
No.
Trustee Lang?
Yes.
Trustee Papantos?
No.
Trustee Rafata?
I'm still here, yes.
Trustee Vito?
Yes.
President Horker?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for all of your time. You have before you the bills for January 2nd through January 15th, 2020. I need a motion for their approval.
So moved.
Motion Rufato, second.
Second.
Second, Trustee Papantos. Roll call, please.
Trustee Vogel?
Yes.
Trustee Lang?
Yes.
Trustee Papantos?
Yes.
Trustee Raffato?
Yes.
Trustee Vito?
Yes.
President Horker?
Yes, we have no executive session tonight.
Are we going to do staff reports?
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Spondilis, you have been very patient.
Thank you. On a serious but much lighter note, I am happy to advertise that the village is expanding its social media presence. We do currently have a Facebook page, two Facebook pages, a Twitter account. We are now expanding that to have both a Facebook page for the village, a police and fire department Facebook page, a revamped existing senior services Facebook page, a Wheeling Twitter account, police department Twitter account, a Village of Wheeling Instagram account, police department Instagram account, and our village YouTube account. You can see on the screen before you that 4 of those things, including the brand new platform for us, of using Instagram have gone live this afternoon. You can see all the addresses there, as well as in the top section of our website, you can find all of the links to all of our social media accounts. We invite everyone to please join them. You will note that we tried to create some uniformity between all of them so that everyone will recognize that they are official pages of the Village of Wheeling, and you'll see kind of the background pages here. Again, social media being the king for getting out information, but also the use now of Instagram, as the description in this picture shows, the official photo journal, which is exactly what Instagram is meant to be. It's a little bit of marketing for the Village of Wheeling to show a little bit more of the brighter side as opposed to just the informational side that Facebook and Twitter provide. So just wanted to make the public aware of these new pages, invite them to participate. And I had one other item, and that is to recognize and thank our Economic Development Director, John Milanofi, who will be leaving us next week.
He is indeed. We appreciate all that he has done for the community over the past 6 years and wish him well on all of his future endeavors.
Thank you, Mr. Milanovic. It was brought to our attention earlier that there's questioning the occupancy at Town Center. Aren't we over 60% rented?
I believe the number was 69 at last count. They are well ahead of their pro forma. That is a fact, regardless of the percentage.
And actually occupied?
I believe the number was 69%, yes. It's
not just leased, but occupied, like.
I believe the number is above 60, yes, but definitely above their pro forma. And Uptown 500, in fact, is so far ahead of the game that they plan to open a leasing office within the next couple of weeks and expect occupancy as a phased project within the next couple of months. Despite the fact that the building is still under construction, they have scheduled their phasing to be such that they will have tenants on site while the later phases are still in development.
Thank you.
And construction has not stopped. Every time I go by there every morning, there's a ton of people working there.
That's correct.
Yeah, so I'm not certain where that one statement came that nobody's there.
Yes, that building is going up in record time.
In record time.
And the Whitley is not occupied, so it's not that the Whitley has not opened. So it's not that they don't have any customers or patients or residents, it's that they simply haven't opened yet.
And do we have any information as to the spots in Town Center as to what will be opening and when?
I hope I'm not giving out a wrong date, but I heard today from the chamber that the ribbon cutting for CMX will be February 5th, with the restaurants, 3 restaurants to follow in short order. That would be Experience Meat and Potatoes and Mia's Cantina. So within the next couple of months, all of those should be open. Obviously, there was a nail salon this morning. The Learning Experience expects to have students very shortly. AT&T is open, the bank is open, Starbucks is open. They're doing quite well as far as occupancy is concerned.
Thank you.
If that's it. Now, thank you, Trustee Papantos. I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Nobody wants to leave.
Who said it? Who said it? Mike?
And I vote.
Raffato.
Raffato?
Second. Trustee Vogel. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good evening, everyone.
Mary? The foundation doesn't have money to pay for